Truck driver saves two dogs shivering in the cold on the road. Little did he know the next day. Robert Johnson was used to long hauls on the icy roads of the northern United States, but he never imagined a simple stop would change his life forever. What began as an act of compassion for two abandoned puppies in the snow would soon turn into a battle testing his endurance, his family, and everything he believed in. It was a July morning when frost covered the Rocky Mountains like a white blanket, and Robert spotted two small figures shivering beside a highway pole. He slowed his Peterbilt and pulled over. There were two golden retriever puppies no more than 3 months old, huddled together, their golden fur damp with melted snow. Their brown eyes stared at him with a mix of fear and hope that struck deep in the 52-year-old man's heart. "Good heavens, what are you doing here, little ones?" Robert murmured, stepping down from the cab. The biting wind made his eyes water, but not as much as the sight of those two helpless creatures. The puppies had clearly been there for hours. There were no houses for miles, just the road winding through snow-covered pines. Robert looked around for any sign of how they'd gotten there, but saw nothing but the wet asphalt and desolate landscape. "Someone left you here, didn't they?" he said, approaching slowly. The puppies didn't try to run, they were too weak. When Robert reached out, they flinched but let him pick them up. The lighter one, with a pink spot on its nose, trembled so hard his heart ached. The other, slightly bigger, tried shielding its little brother despite its exhaustion. Robert wrapped them in his leather jacket and carried them to the truck's heated cab. "Easy now, you're safe," he whispered, turning the heater to full blast. The puppies curled up on the passenger seat, still shivering but showing timid relief. Robert grabbed a water bottle and poured some into the cap, offering it to them. They drank desperately, licking every drop. From the first aid kit he always kept, he pulled out some breakfast biscuits and broke them into small pieces. The puppies devoured them, clearly starved for days. "You'll be okay," he promised, stroking their furry heads. "Uncle Robert's got you." As he drove toward Minneapolis, Robert tried to figure out what to do. His wife, Mary, had always wanted a dog, but they'd never been able to afford one. They lived in a small apartment in Southside, and Robert spent weeks on the road. Plus, money was tight. The trucking company he'd worked at for 15 years was struggling, delaying paychecks and cutting benefits. But looking at the two little ones now sleeping peacefully beside him, he felt he couldn't just hand them over to anyone. There was something special about them, a connection he couldn't explain. When he got home the next afternoon after unloading his cargo, the puppies were still in the cab. They'd recovered a lot during the trip, playing together and showing distinct personalities. The bigger one, which Robert had started calling Duke, was braver and protective. The smaller one, Buddy, was more affectionate and always sought the trucker's lap. "Robert?" Mary was waiting at their second-floor window. "You're home. I thought you weren't coming back till tomorrow." "Hey, sweetheart. I've got a surprise for you," Robert said, scooping up the puppies. Mary rushed downstairs. When she saw the two golden retrievers, her face lit up in a way Robert hadn't seen in months. "Oh my, how beautiful. Where did they come from?" She immediately scooped them up, and the puppies responded with affectionate licks. "Found them abandoned on the road, Mary. They were nearly freezing to death," Robert told the whole story as they went up to the apartment. "Poor babies," Mary murmured, stroking the little ones. "But Robert, how will we take care of them? Our situation is so tight." Robert knew she was right. The delayed paycheck, the mounting bills, the rent due next week. But something inside him refused to give up on those animals fate had placed in his path. "We'll figure it out, love. I can't abandon them now." That's when there was a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Ethel, the neighbor from next door, a 70-year-old woman who always complained about noise. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Ethel," Mary greeted, trying to hide the puppies behind her back. "Mary, dear, I need to talk to you." The neighbor's voice was more serious than usual. "The building manager stopped by this morning. I heard you're 2 months behind on the condo fees." Robert felt his stomach drop. He had hoped for a few more days to sort this out. "Mrs. Ethel, the company is delaying payments, but it'll be back. On track soon." "Robert, I'm not judging you. I know you're hard-working people, but the manager said if you don't pay by Friday, You'll have to find another place." The old woman's eyes showed genuine concern. Just then, Duke peeked out from behind Mary's legs, curious about the visitor. Mrs. Ethel's eyes widened. "You brought dogs? Robert, the building rules prohibit large breeds." "They're still small." "Mrs. Ethel," Mary tried to explain, "but they'll grow. Golden retrievers get huge." The neighbor shook her head. "You can't do this now. With the condo fees and banned animals on top of it, the manager will want you out immediately." After Mrs. Ethel left, Robert and Mary sat silently on the couch. The puppies played on the floor, oblivious to the storm brewing over their heads. "Robert, maybe she's right," Mary said, her voice heavy with sadness. "How can we take care of them if we can't even keep our own home?" Robert watched Duke and Buddy exploring the apartment with childlike curiosity. They had trusted him, chosen him as their savior. How could he betray them now? "We could take them on the road with me," Robert suggested. "Lots of truckers do that." "Robert, be realistic. 2 big dogs in a truck? What about when you're unloading? What if they get sick on the road?" Mary sighed deeply. Besides, the company might not allow it. It was true. North Star Freight had become extremely strict with the rules lately. Any violation meant immediate termination. Robert couldn't afford to lose his job now. The next morning, Robert took the puppies to the local vet, Dr. Henry, a young man who ran a simple but clean clinic. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just starting. Now back to the story. "They're malnourished, but nothing good food won't fix," the vet diagnosed after examining Duke and Buddy. "They need deworming, vaccines, and plenty of quality food." "How much will all that cost?" Robert asked, already dreading the answer. "The exams, meds, and vaccines in about $400 for both, and the special puppy food will run around $150 a month." Robert swallowed hard. $400 was nearly half of what remained in his emergency fund. And $150 a month was an expense that simply didn't fit the budget. "Doctor, don't you know anyone who might want to adopt 2 puppies?" he asked with a heavy heart. "They're very gentle, smart." "Robert, dogs of this breed are expensive. People usually buy them from specialized breeders. It'll be hard to find someone willing to take 2 at once." The vet watched the puppies playing on the clinic floor, "But I can post about them on the clinic's social media." When they got home, Mary had prepared a special spot for the dogs with old cushions and makeshift bowls. She was clearly growing attached to the little ones, which made everything harder. "The vet will try to find a family for them," Robert said, avoiding his wife's eyes. "Oh," Mary's voice was quieter. "Yeah, that's probably for the best." But the days passed, and no one showed interest in the puppies. Duke and Buddy quickly adapted to the family's routine, following Mary around the house and waiting for Robert by the window when he left for work. At night, they slept at the foot of the couple's bed, warming everyone's feet with their little bodies. On Thursday, the day before the deadline given by the building manager, Robert got a call from his supervisor at North Star Freight. "Robert, I need to talk to you urgently. Can you come by today?" At the company office, Robert found Frank, his supervisor of over 10 years, with a grim expression. "Robert, I've got bad news. The board decided on more cuts. We're going to have to let some drivers go." Robert's heart raced. "Frank, you know I've never caused trouble. Always met deadlines." "I know, Robert. That's why I've kept you on this long, but the situation is critical." Frank shuffled the papers on his desk. "I managed to get an alternative, but you won't like it." "What alternative?" "A 30% pay cut and switching to longer routes. You'd be away for 2 weeks, home for 1. "It's this or termination." Robert felt the world crashing down. 30% less meant he'd barely make rent, let alone cover the overdue condo fees, and being away for 2 weeks would make it impossible to care for the puppies. I'd think, Frank. Robert, I need an answer by tomorrow. If you don't accept, I'll have to formalize your termination." When he got home, Robert found Mary crying in the kitchen. Duke and Buddy were at her feet, as if sensing something was wrong. "What happened, honey?" "The building manager came by today. He said he found out about the dogs and that tomorrow, If we don't pay the fees and get rid of them, he'll start the eviction process. Mary wiped her tears. Robert, what are we going to do? Robert told her about the conversation at work. They held each other in the middle of the kitchen, the weight of the world on their shoulders, while Duke and Buddy watched them with innocent eyes. Maybe it's a sign, Mary said. Maybe we shouldn't have kept them in the first place. That night, Robert barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the puppies shivering in the snow, trusting him to save them. How could he explain to them that it was only temporary? How could he hand them over to someone he didn't even know, these little beings who were already part of the family? On Friday morning, Robert made a desperate decision. He called his brother Mark, who lived on a small farm in Bloomington. Mark, I need a huge favor. Can you take 2 puppies for a few days? Robert, I already have 3 dogs here, and Susan's pregnant. We don't need more chaos right now. It's just temporary, until I sort things out. Temporary always. Turns permanent in these stories, brother. I'm sorry. Robert tried other friends, cousins, acquaintances. Everyone had an excuse. Some were honest. They didn't want the responsibility. Others made up problems that didn't exist. In the end, Robert understood a cruel truth. People love animals in photos on social media, but taking real responsibility is another story. At 10 in the morning, the building manager knocked on the door accompanied by a bailiff. Mr. Johnson, I'm here to collect the overdue condo fees and verify the removal of the animals. Robert looked at Duke and Buddy, who were playing carefree in the living room. Mr. Gerald, I've got the condo money, he lied, hoping to buy a few more days. But I need a little more time to sort out the situation with the dogs. Mr. Johnson, the rules are clear. Either the animals leave today or you leave tomorrow. The bailiff seemed uncomfortable but firm. That's when Mary had an idea. Robert, what if we take them to a temporary kennel while you sort things out at work? Robert looked up kennels in the area. The cheapest charged $200 a month per animal. $400 monthly was impossible. The public shelters were full with waiting lists months long. Only one painful option remained, the ACZ, the Animal Control Zone. Robert knew the animals would stay there for a limited time before being euthanized if no one adopted them. I can't do that to them, Mary. I just can't. Then what are we going to do? Live on the streets with 2 dogs? It was a Friday in July and the rain began to fall. Robert watched the drops sliding down the window and imagined Duke and Buddy out in the cold again, wet and shivering. The image tormented him. By 2 in the afternoon, Robert made the hardest decision of his life. He placed the puppies in a cardboard box lined with blankets and took them to the Lakeshore Farmers Market, where he'd seen people selling animals. How much do you want for them? Asked a plain-looking man examining Duke and Buddy. I'm not selling, said Robert. I'm looking for a family who can take care of them. Oh, so it's a giveaway? I'll take both. I've got a big property. They'll have plenty of space. Robert hesitated. The man seemed sincere, but something in his eyes unsettled him. What's your name? Joe. I live over in Southfield. I've had plenty of dogs before. What happened to them? You know how it is. Some die of old age, others run away. Joe's vague answer made Robert suspicious. Let me think about it a little longer. Robert picked up the box with the puppies and left the market. He couldn't hand Duke and Buddy over to someone he barely knew. What if Joe mistreated them? What if he sold them to someone else? What if he abandoned them again? He returned home with nothing resolved. The building manager had left a written ultimatum. The animals had to be out by 6 that evening, or Robert and Mary would be evicted the next day. It was 5:30 when Robert made a desperate decision. He put the puppies in the truck cab and drove to the same road where he'd found them a week earlier. Forgive me, little ones, he whispered, tears in his eyes. I tried, but I couldn't do it. But when he reached the spot and saw the lonely pole in the icy landscape, Robert simply couldn't bring himself to stop the truck. The image of Duke and Buddy shivering in the snow again paralyzed him. He kept driving aimlessly, with the puppies asleep on the seat beside him. It was already dark when Robert pulled into a gas station to think. He called Mary. Honey, I couldn't do it. I couldn't abandon them. Robert, the manager, already came by. He said, if you come back without the dogs, we'll have an eviction notice tomorrow morning. Then I guess we'll have to leave. Robert, are you serious? We're going to lose. Is our home over 2 dogs? Mary's question echoed in Robert's head. It was crazy, really. 2 animals he'd known for only a week versus a 20-year marriage and a home that was all they had. But every time he looked at Duke and Buddy, Robert remembered the moment he found them. They had chosen him as their savior. How could he betray that trust? Robert slept in the truck that night, in the gas station parking lot, with the puppies curled up against him for warmth. In the early hours, Buddy started coughing, a dry, persistent cough that Robert recognized as a symptom of pneumonia. At dawn on Saturday, he took Buddy to the emergency vet. The diagnosis confirmed his worst fears. Early-stage pneumonia, said the on-duty vet. He needs immediate treatment, hospitalization, IV fluids, antibiotics. It'll cost about $1,000. $1,000 Robert didn't have. His bank account held exactly $230 set aside for that week's fuel. Doctor, is there any way to pay in installments? Sir, this is an emergency. It has to be paid up front. Robert looked at Buddy panting on the exam table, his little eyes glassy with fever. Duke whimpered in the carrier, sensing something was wrong with his brother. What? What if I don't do the treatment? The vet hesitated. Pneumonia progresses fast in puppies. Without treatment, he won't last more than 2 or 3 days. Robert's legs felt weak. He left the clinic carrying both puppies, unsure what to do. Buddy grew weaker, his breathing labored. Then he remembered Mrs. Carmen, an elderly woman from the neighborhood who worked at an animal rescue. Maybe she knew of another option. Mrs. Carmen was 75, living in a modest home filled with rescued animals. When Robert arrived with the puppies, she took them in right away. "Oh my, this one is in bad shape," she said, examining Buddy. "He needs urgent care." "Mrs. Carmen, I don't have the money to hospitalize him." "Robert, I know a vet who sometimes does volunteer work for emergencies. Let me call him." Dr. Paul agreed to examine Buddy for free, but was honest about the limitations. "I can provide first aid and some basic meds, but without full hospitalization and treatment, the prognosis isn't good." Robert authorized the basic treatment, knowing it was just buying time. Dr. Paul gave an antibiotic shot and handed over some pills. Half a pill every 8 hours. Keep him warm and hydrated. If he worsens, bring him back immediately. That night, Robert and the puppies slept in the truck again. Buddy was slightly better after the antibiotics, but still coughed heavily. Robert improvised a warm bed with blankets and a hot water bottle. In the early hours, he got a call from Mary. "Robert, the landlord gave me an ultimatum. If we don't pay the overdue rent by Monday, he'll terminate the lease." Her voice was tired, defeated. "Robert, this has gone too far. We can't live like this. Mary, just give me a few more days." "For what, Robert? Are you going to throw away your job, your home, your family for 2 dogs? The question came out harsher than she meant. "They're not just 2 dogs, Mary. They're 2 lives depending on me." "And what about me, Robert? I depend on you too. Or does our life together mean nothing?" The call ended in silence. Robert knew Mary was right, but he couldn't abandon the puppies. It was as if something deeper than reason held him back. On Sunday, Robert tried one last desperate option. He went downtown to Minneapolis, hoping to find someone willing to adopt the puppies in person. He reached Central Park around 10 in the morning. The place was full of families walking their dogs. Robert thought it'd be easier to find people who truly loved animals there. He approached a few families, always polite and respectful. "Sorry to bother you. Do you know anyone who might want to adopt 2 golden retriever puppies?" The responses were always the same. "How adorable. What a shame. We already have a dog. We're traveling. Our apartment is too small." Some people took pictures of the puppies, petted them, but no one showed real interest in adopting them. Around 3 in the afternoon, an elegant woman in her 40s approached. "Are these little ones yours?" she asked, smiling. "I'm looking for a family to adopt them," explained Robert. "They're very gentle and smart. How precious." She played with Duke and Buddy, who responded eagerly. "I've always wanted a golden retriever." Robert felt a spark of hope. "Do you have experience with dogs?" "Of course. I've had several. I live in a big house with a yard. She watched the puppies playing. Can I take both? Absolutely. Robert was relieved, finally a solution. They're inseparable, so it'd be ideal for them to stay together. How much are you asking? I'm not charging anything, I just want a family who'll take good care of them. The woman hesitated. Interesting. Purebred dogs for free. What was that? Nothing. Don't worry. I'll take great care of them. Robert was getting the puppies ready to hand them over when he overheard the woman talking on her phone a bit farther away. Yes, I got 2 golden retrievers for free. I'll bring them to the shop later today. How much did you say you pay per puppy again? Robert's blood ran cold. The woman didn't want to adopt the puppies, she wanted to sell them. Robert quickly grabbed the box with Duke and Buddy and walked away before she noticed. Where are you going? The woman shouted. Didn't you say you were giving them away? Robert quickened his pace, carrying the puppies away from that person. Once again, his naivety had almost cost the little ones dearly. The rest of Sunday was a string of disappointments. Robert spoke to dozens of people, but they either had no real interest or showed suspicious signs. One man only wanted 1 puppy, the prettier one. A family said they wanted them but insisted the puppies would have to sleep in the yard because dogs don't belong inside the house. A young couple showed interest, but when Robert asked about vet care and medical attention, they laughed and said street dogs don't need luxuries. By nightfall, Robert was exhausted and discouraged. Buddy had gotten worse during the day, coughing more and showing weakness. Duke was also listless, as if sensing something was wrong. Robert decided to seek help at churches. Maybe people of faith would be more charitable toward helpless animals. At the first church he visited, the pastor received him politely, but was blunt. Brother, our community has people in need. We can't divert resources to animals. At the second church, an evangelical one in the Riverside neighborhood, the reception was warmer. The pastor, Mrs. Michelle, a gray-haired black woman, listened carefully to Robert's story. Son, I see you have a good heart, but have you considered that maybe God is testing your faith through this situation? How so, Pastor? Sometimes God allows us to face hardships to teach us about priorities. Family, work, responsibilities, those are blessings we must cherish too. Robert realized even the church wouldn't support him in keeping the puppies. The pastor's words, though kind, were just another nudge for him to let the animals go. Monday dawned rainy. Robert had slept poorly in the truck, waking up every hour to check if Buddy was still breathing. The puppy was visibly worse, panting and feverish. At 7 in the morning, he got 2 calls that sealed his fate. The first was from Frank at North Star Freight. Robert, I need your answer about the offer. If you don't accept the new terms, by 9 I'll officially terminate your employment. The second call was from the apartment owner, Mr. Albert. Mr. Robert, I've run out of patience. If you don't pay the overdue rent by noon, I'll take legal action to reclaim the property. I already have other interested parties. Robert looked at Duke and Buddy, who watched him with absolute trust. They didn't know the world was crumbling around them. To the puppies, Robert was safety, shelter, food. He was all they had. At that moment, Robert made a decision that would change his life forever. He called Frank. I accept the termination. I can't agree to the new terms. Robert, are you sure? Jobs are hard to come by these days. I'm sure. Next, he called the apartment owner. Mr. Albert, I'll hand over the keys this afternoon. I couldn't get the money. When he called Mary to tell her his decisions, her reaction was sheer desperation. Robert, you've completely lost your mind. How will we live? Where will we stay? We'll figure it out, Mary. We always have. Figure it out how, Robert? You're 52, jobless, homeless, and still want to carry 2 dogs on your back. Her voice was strained. Robert, this isn't love for animals. It's madness. Mary, when I found them on the road, they were dying. I saved them. Now I'm responsible for them. And what about me, Robert? Aren't you responsible for me too? For our marriage? Mary began to cry. Robert, I'm giving you an ultimatum. Either you get rid of those dogs today and come back to reality, or I'm leaving. Mary, don't talk like that. I'm deadly serious. I won't be destroyed because of your obsession. The call ended. Robert stood frozen in the rain, the puppies inside the truck, feeling like he'd lost everything. His job, his home, and now possibly his marriage. But when he looked at Duke and Buddy, he saw Buddy was in bad shape. His breathing was uneven, and he could barely stand. Robert knew there was no time for regrets. He had to focus on what truly mattered, saving the puppy's life. He took Buddy back to Dr. Paul, who was alarmed by the dog's condition. "Robert, he needs to be hospitalized immediately. The pneumonia has worsened. Without intensive treatment, he won't make it through the night." "Doc, I don't have money for hospitalization." "Robert, there's one option. The veterinary school at UMN sometimes takes cases for clinical training. Students treat the animals under supervision. At no cost, it's his only chance." Robert drove desperately to the university with Buddy unconscious in Duke's lap. At the vet clinic, he was met by Professor Ann Bailey, a woman in her 50s who oversaw the program. "This is severe," she said after examining Buddy. "Advanced bilateral pneumonia, but we can try to save him through the clinical training program." "Professor, what does that mean?" "Buddy will stay here indefinitely. Our students will treat him under my supervision. There's no charge, but you must understand this is a teaching case. We can't guarantee success." Robert signed the paperwork and left Buddy in their care. Duke whimpered when they separated the brothers, as if sensing he might never see him again. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers so much. Now back to the story. That afternoon, Robert returned to the apartment to gather his things. Mary had packed his clothes in a suitcase and left it by the door. "Mary, let's talk." "Robert, there's nothing left to say. You made your choice." She avoided his gaze. "I'll stay at my sister's until I sort things out." "And our marriage?" "What marriage, Robert? You chose 2 dogs over your family." Robert tried to hug her, but Mary pulled away. "Mary, I love you. I always have. But I can't abandon them now." "Then you don't love me enough." Mary grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "When you get tired of living like a beggar because of dogs, call me. Maybe there'll still be time to rebuild our life." She left without looking back. Robert stood alone in the empty apartment, with Duke by his side and the feeling that he'd lost everything that truly mattered. But when Duke rested his head on his leg, offering the only comfort he could, Robert felt maybe he hadn't lost everything. Maybe he'd gained something different, the certainty that he was capable of unconditional love, even if it came at a high price. That night, Robert and Duke slept in the truck for the last time as employees of North Star Freight. The next morning, he'd have to return the company vehicle. Tuesday began with a practical decision. Robert sold his car, a 2010 Chevy, for $3,000. It was all he had of value. With that money, he rented a tiny room in a boarding house in downtown and bought food for Duke. The room was small, with a shared bathroom down the hall, but at least it was a roof over their heads. Duke adjusted quickly to the new space, but Robert noticed the pup was depressed without Buddy's company. During the day, Robert went out looking for work, always taking Duke on an improvised leash. He quickly discovered that having a dog made finding a job even harder. Many employers wouldn't even let him inside. "No animals allowed here," was the phrase he heard most. "He'll stay quiet, sir. You won't even notice he's here. Health regulations don't allow it. Come back another day without the dog." But Robert couldn't leave Duke alone in the tiny room. The pup had developed separation anxiety after being separated from Buddy, whining and barking whenever Robert stepped away. After a week of unsuccessful job hunting, Robert decided to try informal work. He offered his services as a handcart hauler, a loader at farmers' markets, a general helper at construction sites. He managed to land a few odd jobs. He helped with moves, assisted in renovations, unloaded trucks. Duke always went with him, waiting patiently tied up in the shade while Robert worked. The boarding house owners where he worked began to recognize Duke, and some even took a liking to the golden pup, who followed the hauling man. Duke was naturally charismatic, greeting everyone with tail wags and never causing trouble. But the earnings were insufficient and irregular. Robert could cover the boarding house rent and Duke's food, but little was left for other needs. His clothes grew worn, he lost weight from irregular meals, and his beard grew out from lack of money for a barber. 3 weeks after leaving the apartment, Robert got a call from Professor Anne Bailey from UMN. "Robert, I have good news about Buddy. He responded well to treatment. The pneumonia is gone." Robert felt immense relief. "Professor, when can I pick him up?" "That's the issue. Buddy needs special care for a few more weeks. Controlled diet, medication, vet checkups, and..." She hesitated. "Honestly, Robert, can you provide that?" Robert looked around the cramped room with Duke sleeping on a blanket on the floor. "Professor, I'll make it work. They need to stay together." "Robert, we have an offer. A family of veterinarians is interested in adopting Buddy. They can provide all the care he needs, a big house, other dogs to play with." "No." The answer came out harsher than he intended. "I'm sorry, Professor, but I can't separate the brothers. They've already been through so much." "Robert, be realistic. You can barely take care of one dog. How are you going to manage two?" "I'll figure it out, I always do." The teacher sighed. "I'll give you 1 more week to get organized. After that, I'll have to consider other options for Buddy." Robert hung up the phone with another weight on his shoulders. He had 1 week to arrange the bare minimum to care for Buddy, or he'd lose the puppy forever. That's when an idea struck him. What if he offered his services specifically to people who had pets? Dog walking, yard cleaning, basic care. Robert made handwritten flyers advertising his services. Robert, pet caretaker, walks, cleaning, general care, fair prices, experienced and full of love for animals. He posted the flyers in pet stores, vet clinics, and on gates in the Beacon Hill neighborhood, where he knew more affluent people lived. The first call came from Mrs. Helen, an 80-year-old woman who lived alone with 3 Persian cats. "Robert, I need someone to clean my cat's litter boxes every day. My arthritis won't let me do it anymore." "Of course, Mrs. Helen. What were you thinking of paying?" $20 a week. Does that work?" It wasn't much, but it was a start. Robert agreed and went to meet Mrs. Helen. She lived in an old but well-kept house, full of antique furniture and family photos. The cats were fat and spoiled, but Robert treated them all with kindness. "You can bring your dog," Mrs. Helen said, spotting Duke at the door. "He seems well behaved." From then on, Robert had at least a small, steady income. Every day he stopped by Mrs. Helen's to care for the cats, and Duke became company for the lonely woman. "You know, Robert, it's been a long time since I had a young man in the house to talk to," Mrs. Helen said one day. "My children live far away, they hardly ever visit." Robert began to realize his job wasn't just about caring for animals, it was also about keeping lonely people company. Mrs. Helen always offered coffee and cookies and loved telling stories from her youth. His second client was Alexandra, a 40-year-old lawyer who had a Labrador named Moon. "Robert, I work 12-hour days. Moon stays alone and is getting destructive. Can you walk her during the day?" "Of course. How long of a walk?" "An hour a day would be great. I'll pay $50 a week." Robert started settling into a routine. In the mornings, he cared for Mrs. Helen's cats. In the afternoons, he walked Moon, always looking for new clients. Duke became his unofficial assistant. He was the one who broke the ice with other dogs, showing that Robert truly understood animals. People trusted someone who clearly loved his own dog. Within a week, Robert had 5 regular clients. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to cover rent, food for Duke, and even a little extra for emergencies. When he called teacher Anne Bailey, he was more confident. "Teacher, I've gotten myself organized. I have steady income now from pet care. I can come get Buddy." "Robert, your dedication is admirable, but I have to be honest. This family of vets who are interested in Buddy can offer exceptional conditions. Big house, yard, other dogs, constant medical care. Teacher, you don't understand. Duke is depressed without his brother. They can't live apart." "Robert, you're being selfish. Think about the animal's well-being, not just your emotional attachment." The word selfish hit Robert like a punch. Was it true? Was he putting his feelings ahead of the puppy's welfare? That night, Robert watched Duke sleeping on the floor of their cramped little room. The puppy had grown a lot in the last few weeks. He didn't fit comfortably in the small space anymore. His big paws indicated he would grow into a large dog, unsuitable for that environment. Maybe the teacher was right. Maybe his insistence on keeping the puppies was truly selfishness disguised as love. But when Duke woke up in the early hours and sought out Robert to snuggle, offering all the love and trust he had, Robert knew he couldn't give up. Not yet. The next morning, Robert had an important conversation with Mrs. Helen. "Mrs. Helen, do you know anyone who has space for me to live with Duke? This little room is getting too small for him." Mrs. Helen thought for a moment. "Robert, I have a different proposal. How about you come live here? I've had empty rooms since my children grew up. You'd take care of the cats in the house, and I'd only charge for the cost of food." Robert was surprised by her generosity. "Mrs. Helen, that would be perfect, but I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. Robert, I've lived alone for 10 years. Having you and Duke here would be a blessing for me too." And so Robert and Duke moved into Mrs. Helen's house. It was an old 2-story home with 3 bedrooms, a large living room, and a spacious backyard where Duke could run and play. Mrs. Helen showed Robert a room on the 2nd floor. "It was my youngest son's, it can be yours." The room was simple but comfortable, with a single bed, a wardrobe, and a desk. For the first time in weeks, Robert would have a real bed to sleep in. "Mrs. Helen, how can I thank you?" "By taking good care of my cats and keeping me company now and then. At my age, loneliness is worse than any illness." Robert settled into the house and his routine improved significantly. He could leave Duke in the backyard when he went to work with other clients, and Mrs. Helen enjoyed the puppy's company. With better living conditions, Robert called teacher Anne Bailey again. "Teacher, I now have a house with a yard, a stable income, and the means to care for Buddy properly." "Robert, I need to be direct with you. The family interested in Buddy has already visited several times. They're prepared people with experience. Buddy has grown attached to them." "What do you mean, attached?" "When they come to visit, Buddy gets excited, plays, and interacts. He seems happy with them." Robert felt his heart tighten. Was it possible Buddy had forgotten him? That he preferred the new family? "Teacher, can I visit Buddy?" "You can, but I must warn you that the adoption decision will be made next week." Robert went to the university the following afternoon. When he arrived at the veterinary clinic, he asked for Buddy. A student led him to the kennel where the puppy was recovering. Buddy had grown a lot but was still smaller than Duke. When he saw Robert, his ears perked up, and he ran to the bars, barking joyfully. "Buddy, my little one!" Robert opened the kennel, and Buddy jumped into his arms, licking his face with desperate enthusiasm. "He's never reacted like that with anyone else," the student commented. "He's usually more reserved." Robert played with Buddy for an hour. The puppy didn't want to be apart from him for even a second, as if afraid Robert would leave again. "How's his health?" Robert asked. "Fully recovered. He can be discharged any time." When Robert stood up to leave, Buddy began whining and trying to follow him. The scene broke Robert's heart. "Easy, Buddy. You'll be out of here soon." On his way back, Robert was determined. No matter what the teacher said, he wouldn't let the brothers be separated. But when he arrived at Mrs. Helen's house, he found an unpleasant surprise. Mary was in the living room talking with the older woman. "Robert," Mary stood up when he entered. "I need to talk to you." Robert felt awkward. "Hi, Mary, what are you doing here?" "I heard you were living here. Mrs. Helen told me about your situation." Mrs. Helen stood up diplomatically. "I'll make some coffee so you two can talk." When they were alone, Mary got straight to the point. "Robert, I came to get you. Enough of this madness. Mary, I found you a job. My brother-in-law has a small trucking company. It doesn't pay much, but it's steady work. You can start Monday." Robert was surprised. "Mary, that's very generous, but Robert, I'll arrange another apartment for us. We can start over. Forget this rough patch." "What about Duke?" Mary hesitated. "Robert, maybe we can keep one of the dogs. Duke might adjust." "No, Mary, I won't separate them." "Robert, be reasonable. 2 big dogs in an apartment is impossible." "Then I'll stay right here." Mary grew agitated. "Robert, you're choosing 2 animals over your wife. Does that seem normal to you?" "I'm not choosing animals, Mary. I'm choosing not to abandon those who depend on me." "And what about me, Robert?" "Don't. I depend on you." Robert took a deep breath. "Mary, you're an adult, smart, capable. You can rebuild your life. They're helpless puppies who only have me. Robert, this is my last try. Either you come back with me today, or I'll consider our marriage over for good." Robert looked at Duke, who watched the argument with his ears down, sensing the tension in the air. "I'm sorry, Mary, but I can't abandon them." Mary grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "Then goodbye, Robert. Good luck living like a beggar because of dogs." She slammed the door on her way out. Robert stood alone in the room with Duke, feeling like he'd closed a chapter of his life for good. Mrs. Helen returned from the kitchen a few minutes later. "Robert, are you sure about your decision?" "Mrs. Helen, do you think I'm being foolish?" The elderly woman sat beside Robert. "Son, I've lived 80 years. I've seen a lot in this life. And I'll tell you one thing. Loyalty is a rare virtue these days. You're loyal to those who depend on you, even when it costs you dearly. But maybe Mary is right. Maybe I'm being selfish." "Robert, selfish would be abandoning these pups because they're too much trouble. What you're doing is the opposite of selfish." Mrs. Helen's words comforted Robert. For the first time in weeks, he felt understood. The next day, Robert returned to the university for a final conversation with Professor Anne Bailey. "Professor, I came to get Buddy." "Robert, the interested family is coming today to meet him. I think it's best if we all talk together." "All right." The family consisted of Dr. Maurice, a 50-year-old veterinarian, his wife Carla, also a veterinarian, and their teenage daughter Julia. They were kind people, clearly passionate about animals. "Mr. Robert, we know your story with the puppies," said Dr. Maurice. "Your dedication is admirable." "Doctor, they're siblings. They can't be separated." "We understand. That's why we wanted to discuss an idea." Robert listened closely. "What if we adopted both puppies, but you could visit them whenever you wanted?" suggested Carla. "Our house is big, we have other dogs, and we're financially stable." "And what about me?" asked Robert. "What would happen to me?" "You could work with us," said Dr. Maurice, "as we're opening a pet hotel. We need someone with experience and love for animals." The offer was tempting. Robert would have a job, the puppies would have a great home, and he could still see them every day. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, take all the time you need." Robert went home confused. Dr. Maurice's proposal solved all the practical problems, but something inside him resisted. It felt like he was being tested on what truly mattered. He talked to Mrs. Helen about the situation. "Robert, may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Mrs. Helen." "Why are these dogs so important to you? What do they represent?" Robert thought before answering. "Mrs. Helen, when I found them on the road, they were completely helpless. They depended entirely on me to survive. That responsibility changed something inside me." "How so?" "All my life I've been an ordinary man, Mrs. Helen. I worked, paid bills, fulfilled obligations. I never did anything truly important. But when I saved them for the first time, I felt my life had a greater purpose." Mrs. Helen smiled. "Now I understand, Robert. They're not just two dogs to you. They're proof that you're capable of unconditional love." "That's exactly it, Mrs. Helen." "Then you already know your answer for Dr. Maurice." Robert did. As tempting as the offer was, he couldn't hand over Duke and Buddy to someone else. They were his responsibility, his family, his purpose. The next day, he called Dr. Maurice. "Doctor, I really appreciate the offer, but I'm keeping my pups." "Mr. Robert, are you sure this is a decision that could change your life?" "It already has, Doctor. For the better." Robert went to pick up Buddy from the university. When the brothers reunited in Mrs. Helen's backyard, it was a celebration. Duke and Buddy chased each other, played, rolled in the grass as if trying to make up for all the lost time. "Now you'll never be apart again," Robert promised, petting them both. Mrs. Helen watched from the window with a smile. "Robert, now your family is complete." The next few months brought a stable routine for Robert, Duke, and Buddy. The pups grew quickly, becoming two beautiful, healthy golden retrievers. Robert expanded his pet-sitting services, building a loyal clientele in the neighborhood. But life rarely lets things stay stable for long. In November, Mrs. Helen received an unexpected visit. Her children, who lived in Chicago, showed up unannounced. "Mom, we need to talk to you about this situation," said Charles, the eldest son. "We heard you're living with a stranger." Robert isn't a stranger. He's a good young man who helps me and keeps me company. Mom, you're 80 years old, you can't trust just anyone, said Lucy, the youngest daughter. And those huge dogs? What if they attack you? Robert was in the backyard with Duke and Buddy when he heard the argument. Her children were pressuring Mrs. Helen to send him away. You never cared about me before, Mrs. Helen said, visibly upset. Now that I have company, you come to interfere. Mom, we're worried about your safety and your assets too. The insinuation that Robert might be interested in Mrs. Helen's property deeply offended him, but he didn't interfere in the family conversation. Mrs. Helen's children stayed at the house for 2 weeks, creating a tense atmosphere. They questioned everything. Why Robert didn't pay rent, why the dogs roamed freely in the house, why Mrs. Helen trusted him. Robert offered to leave temporarily, but Mrs. Helen refused. Robert, you're not leaving. This is your home too. But the pressure from her children was constant. They threatened Mrs. Helen with legal action to declare her incompetent, claiming she was senile for trusting strangers. The situation reached its limit when Charles accused Robert directly. You're taking advantage of an elderly woman. That has a name, fraud. Robert had had enough. Mr. Charles, I've never asked your mother for anything but a roof over my head. I take care of her cats, keep her company, help around the house. That's exactly what con artists do. They gain trust to pull scams later. Mrs. Helen lost her temper. Charles, that's enough. Robert is more of a son to me than you all who only show up when you want something. The argument ended badly. Charles threatened to return with a lawyer and a social worker to evaluate Mrs. Helen's mental capacity. That night, Robert spoke seriously with the lady. Mrs. Helen, I don't want to cause problems in your family. Maybe it's better if I look for another place. Robert, if you leave, I'm leaving too. I'll sell this house and move to a small apartment. Let's see if my children even care. Mrs. Helen, don't do this because of me. Robert, you gave me back the joy of living. My children gave me grandchildren I never see and visits I can count on one hand. You gave me affection, respect, and companionship every day. Robert was moved, but he knew the situation was unsustainable. Mrs. Helen's children wouldn't give up easily. 2 weeks later, Charles returned with a social worker. They wanted to assess if Mrs. Helen was being manipulated or coerced. The social worker, a professional woman in her 40s, spoke at length with Mrs. Helen without Robert present. Mrs. Helen, I understand you appreciate Mr. Robert's company, but your children are worried. A younger man living in your home, for free with large animals, it could be dangerous. Dear, I've lived 80 years. I know how to tell good people from bad. Robert is a good person, but you don't know his past. He could have a criminal record, debts, family issues. We all have a past, sweetheart. What matters is the present. The social worker prepared a report in Mrs. Helen's favor, confirming her lucidity and decision-making capacity, but she recommended the family establish clear rules about Robert's situation. Charles proposed an agreement. Robert could stay, but he'd pay a symbolic rent and sign a formal contract as a caretaker. It's this or we go to court, Charles threatened. Robert accepted the terms. He signed a contract as a caretaker, agreeing to pay $200 monthly in rent and keep the house in good condition. For a few months, things stabilized. Robert continued his work as an animal caregiver, now officially listed as self-employed. Duke and Buddy grew into magnificent golden retrievers, turning heads wherever they went. Robert had found his place in the world. He had a home, work, a canine family, and a mother figure in Mrs. Helen. It wasn't the life he'd planned at 50, but it was a life with purpose and meaning. But in March of the following year, life got complicated again. Mrs. Helen began showing signs of cognitive decline. She forgot names, repeated stories, mixed up dates. Robert cared for her with the same dedication he gave his dogs. He took her to the doctor, organized her medications, and kept her company during moments of confusion. When Charles learned of his mother's condition, he returned to Minneapolis immediately. Robert, thank you for taking care of her, but now she needs professional care. Charles, I can keep helping. Mrs. Helen is calmer with me. Robert, this isn't about goodwill anymore. Mom needs constant medical supervision. Charles arranged for Mrs. Helen to be admitted to a specialized care facility. Robert said goodbye with tears in his eyes. "Mrs. Helen, I'll never forget you. Robert, take good care of your boys. And remember, you're a good person. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." With Mrs. Helen in care, Charles decided to sell the house. Robert would have to leave. "Robert, I can give you 3 months to get organized. It's enough time to find another place." Robert was back to square one. At 53, homeless, with 2 large dogs and an informal job that barely covered the basics, he searched for rentals across the entire metropolitan area, but the reality was harsh. No one would rent to someone with 2 large dogs, especially without formal proof of income. "Sir, if it were just one small dog," most landlords would say, "but they're very well behaved, they've never caused any trouble." It's not about behavior. It's about insurance, neighbors, building regulations. Robert started considering sleeping in his car again, but he'd sold it nearly a year ago. His situation was desperate. That's when he remembered his old supervisor from North Star, Freight Frank. Maybe Frank knew a trucker who needed a partner for long hauls. He called Frank. "Robert, how are you, man?" "Things are rough, Frank. I'm looking to get back on the road." "Robert, I'm sorry, but things have gotten bad here. The company shut down last month. Total bankruptcy." Another door closed. Robert was running out of options. He decided to seek help at the church he'd visited months earlier. Pastor Michelle welcomed him warmly. "Robert, I remember you. How are those pups doing?" "Pastor, I'm in a tough spot. I need guidance." Robert shared everything that had happened since they last met. The pastor listened carefully. "Robert, I'll be honest with you. Our church has a social assistance program, but it's for human emergencies. We don't have resources to help with animals." "Pastor, I'm not asking for money, just advice on what to do." "Robert, I'll give you the same advice as before. Maybe it's time to rethink your priorities. You're 53, homeless without stable work. Wouldn't it be wiser to find the dogs a new family and rebuild your own life?" Robert knew the pastor was being practical, but her words cut like knives. "Pastor, they're my family now." "Robert, family is more than affection, it's responsibility. And if you can't provide for them, maybe the responsible choice is different." Robert left the church more confused than when he'd arrived. Was everyone right and he was wrong? Was his insistence on keeping the dogs really love or just selfishness in disguise? That night, his last weekend at Mrs. Helen's house, Robert sat in the backyard with Duke and Buddy. The 2 dogs, now grown and handsome, played in the grass as they did every evening. Duke came over and rested his head on Robert's lap, just as he'd done since he was a puppy whenever his human was sad. Buddy followed, pressing his warm body against Robert's legs. "What do you think, boys?" Robert whispered. "Everyone says you'd be better off with a wealthy family in a big house." Duke locked eyes with Robert, that intense look golden retrievers get when they're fully focused on their owner. Buddy sighed and lay at Robert's feet, as he always did before bed. To them, it didn't matter if the house was big or small, if there was a yard or not. All that mattered was being with Robert. They'd chosen him on that icy road and kept choosing him every day. Robert realized the question wasn't whether he was being selfish or selfless. The question was whether he had the courage to honor a commitment he'd made willingly. "All right, boys, we'll stay together till the end. I don't know how, but we will." On Monday, Robert redoubled his housing search. He visited every real estate office in the area, explained his situation to dozens of landlords, offered a cosigner, a larger deposit, a shorter lease. The answer was always the same. 2 large dogs were an absolute deal-breaker. Then he had a different idea. What if he looked for someone who needed a caretaker in exchange for housing, farms, rural properties, businesses? He placed ads in local newspapers and online sites. Experienced caretaker, 53 years old, responsible, looks after rural or commercial properties, accepts simple housing in exchange for work, has 2 well-trained dogs. The first response came from old Anthony, owner of a junkyard in the north side of Minneapolis. "Son, I need someone to watch the yard at night. There are a lot of thieves in the area. Would you be up for it?" Robert went to see the junkyard. It was a large lot, surrounded by high walls full of old cars and metal scrap. At the back stood a simple two-room house. The place is basic, but it has electricity, water, and a bathroom, explained old Anthony. The job is to stay. Here at night, do rounds, scare off intruders. I'll pay $300 a month plus housing. Robert accepted immediately. It wasn't his dream job, but it solved his housing problem and provided a basic income. What about the dogs? Asked old Anthony. They're well-behaved, no trouble. Well-behaved, my foot, I want them here. 2 golden retrievers loose in the yard will scare off any thief better than an electric fence. Robert smiled. Finally, someone saw Duke and Buddy as an advantage, not a problem. The move to the junkyard was a fresh start. The little house was, indeed, simple, a bedroom, kitchen, and bathroom. But it had enough space for the 3 of them, and the big yard let Duke and Buddy run freely. During the day, Robert continued his work as an animal caretaker in the area. At night, he kept watch over the junkyard. Duke and Buddy quickly adapted to the new routine, showing natural guard instincts. Life was settling down again when Robert got an unexpected call. "Robert, it's Mary." Robert was surprised. "Hi, Mary, how are you?" "Robert, I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" They arranged to meet at a cafe downtown. Mary looked different, thinner, with a tired expression. "Robert, I want to apologize," she said, getting straight to the point. "I was wrong about a lot of things." "Mary, let me finish. After we split up, I rebuilt my life. I got another job, other relationships, but I could never forget you." Robert stayed silent, waiting. "Robert, I've met other people since then. And you know what I realized? That truly loyal men are rare. Most only think of themselves when things get tough. Mary, I don't see where you're going with this. Robert, you gave up everything for your dogs. Job, home, marriage. At the time, I thought it was crazy. Now I see it was character." Mary held Robert's hand across the table. "Robert, I want to try again, but this time your way, with Duke and Buddy." Robert was stunned. "Mary, are you sure about this? I found a bigger apartment that allows pets. We can start our life together again, all of us." The offer was tempting. Robert still loved Mary, despite everything. But something had changed in him during those hard months. "Mary, why now?" "Because now I understand you didn't choose the dogs over me. You just don't abandon those you love, and that includes me too." Robert was confused by Mary's sudden change of heart. "Mary, I need to think. Robert, I know I hurt you, but we still love each other. We can be happy together." Robert returned to the junkyard deep in thought. He told old Anthony about Mary's proposal. "Robert, a woman who comes back is because things didn't work out with the other guy," asked old Anthony with folksy wisdom. "Are you sure she's really changed?" It was a fair question. Robert decided he needed time to weigh Mary's intentions. They arranged more meetings. Mary met Duke and Buddy again, and to Robert's surprise, the dogs welcomed her warmly. She made an effort to show affection for them. "They've grown so much," said Mary, petting Duke. "And they really are beautiful." Robert was watching carefully. Mary seemed sincere, but he had learned to be cautious. For a few weeks, they dated again. Mary would visit Robert at the junkyard, play with the dogs, help with basic care. "Robert, I found the perfect apartment for us," she said one day. 2 bedrooms, big balcony, allows pets. We can move in together next week." Robert hesitated. "Mary, I'm still getting used to the idea." "Robert, don't you trust me anymore?" "It's not about trust, it's just that my life has changed a lot. I have different responsibilities now." "What responsibilities?" "The dogs." "Robert, they'll be better off in an apartment than in a junkyard." Robert realized Mary still didn't fully understand the transformation he had gone through. To her, the dogs were just pets. To Robert, they were family, commitment, his life's purpose. "Mary, I need more time." Mary got upset. "More time for what, Robert?" "I'm offering everything you ever wanted. Our marriage back, a home, stability." "Mary, what I always wanted has changed." "Changed for what?" Robert thought before answering. "To make sure my decisions are based on real love, not convenience." Mary didn't like the answer. "Robert, you're complicating something that should be simple. We love each other, we have history, We can be happy. Mary, you left. Me at the worst moment of my life. When I had to choose between you and the dogs, you forced me to choose. Robert, I was wrong. I've already apologized. I know you have. But now I need to be sure you won't force me to choose again if another difficulty comes up. The conversation ended tensely. Mary left angry, saying Robert was being unfair by bringing up past mistakes. Robert talked to Duke and Buddy that night. What do you think, boys? She seemed sincere, but Duke and Buddy listened attentively, but obviously had no opinions about human relationships. To them, what mattered was that Robert was there, as he always had been. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Robert decided to talk to Mrs. Helen about the situation. He visited her at the nursing home where she was staying. Mrs. Helen had declined quite a bit cognitively, but still had moments of clarity. When she saw Robert, her eyes lit up. "Robert, my boy," she hugged him affectionately. "Hi, Mrs. Helen, how are you?" "Oh, you know, old age is complicated, but tell me, how are your boys?" Robert told her about Duke and Buddy, about the junkyard, about Mary. "Mrs. Helen, I don't know if I should give her a second chance." Mrs. Helen grew serious for a moment. "Robert, let me ask you something. If Mary leaves you again, will you survive? I will. And if you turn her down now and she never comes back, will you survive? I will too. Then the question isn't about survival. It's about what truly makes you happy." Robert understood what Mrs. Helen meant. The decision about Mary shouldn't be based on fear of being alone or uncertainty about the future. "Mrs. Helen, what really makes me happy is knowing I can love unconditionally." "Then you already have your answer, my boy." Robert left the nursing home with more clarity. It wasn't about whether to give Mary a second chance, it was about understanding what kind of relationship he wanted moving forward. The following week, Mary called demanding a final answer. "Robert, I got the apartment, I arranged everything. I need to know if you're coming with me or not." "Mary, can I ask you something?" "Of course. If a year from now I lose my job again, or the dogs get sick and I need to spend a lot of money on them, or another problem comes up that tests our patience, will you stay with me?" Mary hesitated. "Robert, why do you always think about what could go wrong?" "Because that's exactly what happened last time." "Robert, I promise it'll be different." "Mary, I don't want promises. I need to know you understand that Duke and Buddy are part of me now. They're not negotiable." "Robert, of course I understand." "Then will you agree to move to the scrapyard? Live with me here, the way my life is now?" The question caught Mary off guard. "Robert, but I've already found an apartment." "Mary, if you've really changed, where we live shouldn't matter." "Robert, be fair. A scrapyard is no place for a woman to live." "Why? Because it's not pretty? Because the neighbors will judge? Because it's not the standard you imagined for your life?" Mary fell silent. "Mary, you're offering to come back to me, but on your terms. The apartment you chose, the life you planned, it's not much different from before." "Robert, that's not it." "Mary, if you really love me, come live with me here. It's that simple." Mary ended the call saying she needed to think. Robert knew he'd never hear from her again. And he didn't. Mary never called back. Robert understood she was offering a conditional relationship. She'd take him back only if he fit into the lifestyle she deemed appropriate. But Robert had learned that true love isn't conditional. Duke and Buddy loved him in the Southside apartment, in Mrs. Helen's house, in the scrapyard or anywhere else. They asked for nothing but his presence. The following months brought stability and growth for Robert. His work as an animal caregiver flourished. He'd built a solid reputation in the neighborhood, and clients recommended him to other pet owners. Duke and Buddy became his best calling cards, beautiful, well-behaved, and charismatic dogs. People trusted Robert when they saw how well he cared for his own pets. He even made a small business card. Robert Johnson, professional animal caregiver. Walks, boarding, special care. Love and experience guaranteed. His income improved significantly. Robert could cover his expenses, keep Duke and Buddy well fed, and even save a little each month. Mr. Anthony was impressed by Robert's dedication. "Son, I've never had a caretaker this responsible, and those dogs are better than any security system. It was true, Duke and Buddy had natural protective instincts. If someone approached the scrapyard at night, they'd bark to alert Robert, but they were never aggressive with familiar faces. Robert realized he'd found his place in the world. It wasn't what he'd imagined at 20, but it was a place where he felt useful, where his skills were valued, where he could live by his principles. Then one day he got an unexpected call. It was Professor Ann Bailey from UMN. "Robert, how are Duke and Buddy doing?" "Great, Professor. They've grown into two beautiful, healthy dogs." "Robert, I'm calling because an opportunity came up. That might interest you." Robert was curious. "The university is starting an animal-assisted therapy program. We need trained dogs and dedicated owners to visit hospitals, nursing homes, special schools." "Sounds interesting. How would it work?" "The dogs would go through special training and behavioral evaluations. If approved, they'd make regular therapy visits. It's volunteer work, but very rewarding." Robert liked the idea. "Professor, would Duke and Buddy be a good fit?" "Golden retrievers are ideal for therapy. They're naturally gentle and empathetic. And from what I see of your relationship, I'm sure you'd do well." Robert signed up Duke and Buddy for the program. They went through months of training, learning specific commands, advanced socialization, and therapeutic interaction techniques. Their first assignment was at a nursing home. Robert and the dogs visited once a week, bringing moments of joy to isolated seniors. "Robert, your dogs are magical," said the nursing home coordinator. "The residents spend all week looking forward to your visit." It was true. Duke and Buddy had a natural talent for identifying people who needed extra affection. They'd approach gently, offer emotional support, and play within each person's limitations. Robert discovered a new dimension of the love he felt for his dogs. They weren't just his family. They were instruments of healing and joy for others. The therapy program expanded. Robert and the dogs began visiting a children's hospital, a school for autistic children, and a rehabilitation clinic. Everywhere they went, the reaction was the same. Duke and Buddy touched people deeply, offering unconditional love that often made the difference between despair and hope. Robert realized his decision to keep the dogs had been wiser than he'd imagined. Not only had he saved 2 lives on that icy road, but he'd also created a source of healing and joy that benefited dozens of people. A year later, Robert received a special invitation. The university was hosting an event to showcase the results of the animal-assisted therapy program, and they wanted Robert and his dogs to be the keynote presenters. "Robert, you and your dogs are the perfect example of how the human-animal bond can transform lives," said Professor Ann Bailey. On the day of the event, Robert dressed in his best clothes and brought Duke and Buddy to the university auditorium. Dozens of people filled the audience: veterinarians, psychologists, students, and family members of patients who'd benefited from the program. Robert told his story from the beginning: the encounter on the road, the struggles, the tough choices, the personal transformation. "When I found Duke and Buddy on that icy morning, I thought I was saving 2 lives, Robert told the crowd. "Today I understand they saved mine." The audience applauded, moved. Many approached afterward to thank Robert and the dogs for their work. An elegant white-haired woman waited until everyone had left before speaking to Robert. "Mr. Robert, my name is Dorothy Wilson. I run a foundation that works with animal-assisted therapy." "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Wilson." "Robert, I'd like to make you an offer. Our foundation is looking for a coordinator for a new therapy program in public hospitals. Would you be interested?" Robert was surprised. "Mrs. Wilson, I don't have the academic background for this." "Robert, you have something more important: hands-on experience and genuine love for animals. We can provide any additional training you might need." The offer included a fair salary, benefits, and the chance to expand therapeutic work across the entire metro area. "Mrs. Wilson, can I bring Duke and Buddy?" "Robert, they'd be the heart of the program. We want to create a training center using the exact model you've developed." Robert accepted the offer. It was the opportunity to turn his passion into an official career with recognition and financial stability. The new job brought significant improvements to Robert's life. He rented a small house with a yard, bought a used car, and could now afford regular vet care for Duke and Buddy, but the greatest reward was professional fulfillment. Every day, Robert saw the positive impact therapy dogs had on people's lives. During an afternoon shift at the children's hospital, Robert witnessed a scene that deeply moved him. An 8-year-old girl, hospitalized for months with a serious illness, had stopped speaking and refused to cooperate with treatments. When Duke approached her, something changed. The girl timidly reached out and touched the dog's head. Duke stayed perfectly still, letting her explore his golden fur. "He's beautiful," whispered the girl, her first words in weeks. Duke gently rested his head on the child's lap, and she began to cry. Not from sadness, but from relief at feeling an emotional connection after so long isolated by illness. From that day on, the girl began cooperating with treatments, always, asking when her dogs would return. Cases like this multiplied. Robert documented each story, building scientific evidence about the benefits of animal-assisted therapy. 2 years after starting at the foundation, Robert was invited to present at a national conference on animal therapy. His talk was titled, "From the Highway to the Hospital: How 2 Abandoned Puppies Became Agents of Healing." Robert told his story again, but now with concrete data, hundreds of patients served, measurable improvement rates, and developed therapeutic protocols. "The connection between humans and animals goes beyond affection," Robert concluded. "It's a healing force that can transform lives, both for those who receive and those who give." The talk was a success. Robert received invitations to replicate the program in other states, but the greatest reward came at the end of the event, when a young veterinarian approached him. "Professor Robert, my name is Carla. I'm a final-year vet student, and I want to specialize in animal-assisted therapy because of your work." Robert was moved to be called Professor. He'd never imagined his story would inspire other professionals. "Carla, I'm honored, but just call me Robert." "Robert, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. Do you regret any of the choices you made? Giving up a more comfortable life for your dogs?" Robert looked at Duke and Buddy, resting peacefully after a day's work. They had aged, with some white fur around their muzzles, but their loving dedication remained unchanged. "Carla, I've learned that comfort and happiness are different things. I may have given up comfort, but I gained something far more valuable, the certainty that I'm living by my values. And if you could go back in time, would you do anything differently?" Robert smiled. "If I went back, I'd stop on that icy highway much sooner. Maybe then I could have spared them so much suffering." Carla was touched by his answer. "Robert, you're an inspiration to all of us who choose to care for animals." That night, in his hotel room during the conference, Robert reflected on his journey. He'd gone from an unemployed truck driver to an expert in animal-assisted therapy, from an ordinary man to someone inspiring other professionals. But most importantly, he knew Duke and Buddy had found their purpose in life. They weren't just pampered pets, they were healers, agents of change, living proof that unconditional love can overcome any obstacle. Robert picked up the phone and called Mrs. Helen at the care home. "Mrs. Helen, it's me, Robert. Robert, my dear boy, how are you?" "Wonderful, Mrs. Helen. I'm at a conference presenting the boys' work. How proud I am. I always knew the 3 of you were special." "Mrs. Helen, I wanted to thank you for believing in me when everyone said I was wrong." "Robert, I never doubted you. When you truly love, you always find a way to make it work." When Robert hung up the phone, Duke and Buddy approached him, as they always did when they sensed he was emotional. "Thank you, boys," Robert whispered, hugging both dogs. "Thank you for choosing me on that road. Thank you for teaching me what true love is." Duke and Buddy responded with affectionate licks and curled up at Robert's feet to sleep. Outside it began to rain, reminding Robert of that first cold night when it all began. But now the rain brought no worry. It brought gratitude for a journey that had turned tragedy into purpose, abandonment into love, and loneliness into family. Robert fell asleep holding Duke and Buddy, knowing he had made all the right decisions. It hadn't been easy, it hadn't been comfortable, but it had been true. And sometimes, being true to yourself is all a person needs to find their place in the world. 5 years had passed since that cold morning on the road. Robert, now 58, had become a national reference in animal-assisted therapy. The foundation where he worked had grown, opening branches in 3 states. Duke and Buddy, now 8-year-old veterans, remained active in the therapy program, but Robert had begun reducing their workload to preserve their health. One Tuesday morning, Robert received a call he wasn't expecting. "Robert, this is Charles, Mrs. Helen's son." Robert felt a pang of worry. "Hi Charles, how's your mother?" "Robert, Mom passed away last night. It was peaceful in her sleep." Robert's heart tightened. Mrs. Helen had been like a mother to him when he needed it most. "Charles, I'm so sorry. Mrs. Helen was a very special person. Robert, she left something for you." "What do you mean?" "Mom made a will. She left the old house to you." Robert was speechless. "Charles, that can't be true." "It is. She always said you were more of a son to her than we were, and she left a letter explaining her decision." At Mrs. Helen's funeral, Robert cried as he hadn't in years. Duke and Buddy, who always stayed in the car during formal events, sensed their owner's sadness and were especially tender with him. Mrs. Helen's letter was moving. "My dear Robert, if you're reading this, I've already gone to join my husband. Don't be sad. I lived 85 years surrounded by love. I'm leaving the house to you because I know you'll care for it with love. More importantly, I know you understand the value of a home. You taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who stands by us in hard times. You stood by me, cared for me, and brought me joy in my final years. Take good care of your boys. They're lucky to have a father like you. With all my love, Helen." Robert inherited the house where he had been so happy. He decided to turn it into the headquarters of a new project, a training school for therapy dogs. The Helen Wilson Institute for Animal-Assisted Therapy became a national reference. Robert trained dogs and their owners for therapeutic work, expanding the program across the United States. Duke and Buddy became the school's senior instructors, demonstrating techniques for younger dogs and serving as examples of harmonious human-animal relationships. One autumn afternoon, Robert was in the backyard watching a new class of puppies in training when he received an unexpected visitor. It was Mary. She looked different, older, with a weary expression. She hesitated at the gate. "Robert, may I?" "Come in." Robert was surprised but opened the gate. "Of course, Mary, come in." Duke and Buddy approached her, but without their old enthusiasm. 8 years had passed. They greeted her politely, but with indifference. "Robert, I heard about your success. I saw stories about you on TV." "Thank you. How have you been?" "Oh, you know what, life went on." Mary observed the backyard full of dogs in training. "What a beautiful place you've created here." "Mary, can I help you with something?" She hesitated before answering. "Robert, I came to ask for your forgiveness." "Truly this time?" Robert listened carefully. "I spent all these years thinking you were crazy for choosing the dogs, but seeing where you've ended up, I realized you were right from the start." "Mary, you didn't have to come here for that." "Yes, I did, Robert. You deserve to hear that I was wrong, completely wrong." Mary began to cry. "You're the most honorable man I've ever known, and I threw away the chance to live beside that integrity." Robert felt compassion for Mary, but no romantic love anymore. That feeling had transformed into other things over the years. "Mary, thank you for saying that. It means a lot to me." "Robert, would you be able to forgive me? Maybe we could." Robert gently interrupted. "Mary, I forgave you a long time ago, but I can't go back to the past." "Robert, I've changed, really, this time." "Mary, I'm sure you have, but I've changed too. I'm a different person from the man you knew." Robert explained his routine, his commitments, his life dedicated to the animals, and his therapeutic work. "My life is simple, Mary. I wake up at 5 in the morning to care for the dogs, work all day with therapy, and go to bed early. I don't go out to bars, I don't travel to exotic places. I have no material ambitions." "Robert, that doesn't bother me anymore." "Mary, the problem isn't whether it bothers you or not. The problem is that you're not part of this life. This is a life I built alone, with my values, my choices." Mary understood that Robert had closed that door for good, not out of bitterness, but growth. "Robert, can I ask you something? Are you happy?" Robert looked around. Duke and Buddy rested in the shade, watching the puppies play. In the house's lab, his assistant organized materials for the next therapy session. In the office, there were invitations to speak at international conferences. "Mary, I'm happy in a way I never imagined possible." "What way?" "I'm happy because I wake up every day knowing exactly why I'm alive. I have purpose. I have family. I have work that makes a difference in people's lives." Mary smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "Robert, I'm genuinely happy for you." She said goodbye to Robert with a warm hug. Before leaving, she knelt to pet Duke and Buddy. "Thank you for taking such good care of him, boys." The dogs allowed the affection, showing no resentment. To 2. Them, Mary was just another person visiting their home. After Mary left, Robert grew thoughtful. He felt no nostalgia or regret, only gratitude for making the right decisions, even when everyone said he was wrong. That night, as Robert was writing, reports, he got a call from the Children's Hospital coordinator. "Robert, I have some exciting news." "What happened?" "Remember the girl Caroline who met Duke 3 years ago, the one with cancer?" "Of course. How is she?" "Robert, she's cured. And more, she's decided she wants to be a veterinarian specializing in animal therapy. She says she wants to be like Uncle Robert and the magic dogs." Robert was deeply moved. "She really said that?" "Robert, you have no idea how many kids have said they want to be vets because of your work. You're inspiring a whole new generation." When he hung up, Robert called Duke and Buddy. "Did you hear that, boys? We're going to have vet colleagues who grew up knowing you." Duke wagged his tail, as he always did when Robert spoke in a cheerful tone. Buddy approached and rested his head on his owner's lap, his way of showing affection. Robert hugged both dogs, his companions on an extraordinary journey. "You know something, boys? That cold morning on the road was the best day of my life, not because it had been easy or comfortable, but because it was the day Robert discovered who he truly was, someone capable of loving unconditionally, even when it cost him everything he had. And in discovering this about himself, Robert had found not just 2 dogs to love, but a purpose that would give meaning to the rest of his life." Duke and Buddy fell asleep at Robert's feet, as they had every night. For 8 years. Outside, the wind rustled the trees in the backyard, but inside, the peace of a family that had chosen each other and remained united against all odds reigned. Robert watched his sleeping dogs and smiled. He had lost his job, his home, his marriage, and the life he had planned. But he had gained something infinitely more valuable, the certainty that it was possible to live with integrity, that true love always finds a way, and that sometimes losing everything is necessary to discover what truly matters. On a winter morning, 10 years after that encounter on the road, Robert woke up early as he always did. Duke and Buddy, now elderly at 11 years old, took a little longer to get up. Robert noticed that Buddy was slower, struggling with stairs. Duke also showed signs of aging, completely white fur on his muzzle, more careful movements. At their routine vet checkup, Dr. Paul, who had been with the dogs from the beginning, was honest with Robert. "Robert, they're getting older. Golden Retrievers can live to 12 or 13 if well cared for, but you need to prepare for changes." "What kind of changes?" "Less physical activity, more special needs, possible health issues, and eventually..." He hesitated. "You'll have to say goodbye to them." Robert knew this day would come, but he had never allowed himself to think about it. Duke and Buddy had been part of him for so long that imagining life without them seemed impossible. "Doctor, how much time do they have?" "Robert, there's no way to predict. It could be 6 months, it could be 3 years. It depends on many factors." Robert decided to cherish every moment with his companions. He further reduced their workload in the therapy program, reserving only special sessions for children who had developed unique bonds with the dogs. One of these children was Peter, a 12-year-old autistic boy who only communicated through Duke. The boy had created his own language with the dog, using gestures and sounds only the 2 of them understood. "Uncle Robert, is Duke gonna get old?" Peter asked during one session. "Yes, Peter, we all get old. But he won't die, right? Because then I'd be sad." Robert was moved by the boy's concern. "Peter, Duke is well taken care of, and even when he gets very old, he'll always love you." In the following months, Robert started a special project, Memories of Duke and Buddy. He documented all the dog's stories, photographed every therapy session, and recorded testimonials from people whose lives they had touched. His goal was to create a book that would preserve their legacy, showing how two abandoned puppies had become healers for hundreds of people. Robert interviewed dozens of patients who had known Duke and Buddy over the years. The stories were touching. Children who smiled again after difficult surgeries, elderly people who found joy in loneliness, adults who overcame depression through therapy with the dogs. "Professor Robert, Duke taught me to trust people again," said Martha, a 70-year-old woman who had met the dogs after her husband's passing. "After my husband died, I thought I'd never feel love again. Duke showed me I could still give and receive affection." Stories like Martha's multiplied. Robert realized Duke and Buddy had touched more lives than he'd imagined. One spring afternoon, while organizing photos for the book, Robert found the first picture he'd taken of the puppies in the truck cab. They were so small, they fit in the palm of his hand. Now they were big, dignified dogs with graying fur and wise eyes. "Look how tiny you were," he said, showing the photo to Duke and Buddy. The dogs sniffed the picture, as if recognizing something familiar. Robert understood he was emotionally preparing for goodbye. It wasn't morbid or pessimistic, just realistic. He wanted to cherish every moment he still had with his companions. He decided to take one last special trip. He rented a house on a beach in the Rocky Mountains and spent a week with just Duke and Buddy. No work, no obligations, just enjoying each other's company. On the beach, the dogs rediscovered their youthful energy. They ran on the sand, played in the waves, chased seagulls. Robert had never seen them so happy and free. "You boys deserve this vacation," Robert said, sitting on the sand as the dogs played in the water. "You've spent your lives caring for others. Now it's time to care for you." Duke ran to Robert and shook his wet fur, splashing water everywhere. Buddy followed close behind, carrying a stick he'd found on the beach. It was a simple moment, but Robert knew it was one of the happiest of his life. There was nowhere else he'd rather be, no one else he'd rather be with. On their last night at the beach, Robert stayed awake watching Duke and Buddy sleep. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating their golden fur. They breathed peacefully, perhaps dreaming of the day's adventures. Robert took out his notebook and wrote, "Dear Duke and Buddy, I've never been able to explain why you mean so much to me. Maybe it's because you taught me true love has no conditions. Maybe it's because you showed me it's worth fighting for those we love. Or maybe it's simply because you're the best people I've ever known. Yes, people. To me, you're golden-furred, four-legged, big-hearted people. If I go first, I want you to know you were the best part of my life. And if you go first, I promise to honor everything you taught me. Thank you for choosing me on that icy road. Thank you for staying with me even when everyone said I was wrong. Thank you for making me the person I am today. With all my love, Robert." When they returned from the beach, Robert noticed Buddy was more tired than usual. He slept more, ate less, and showed little interest in his usual activities. Dr. Paul confirmed Robert's fears. Buddy was developing kidney issues, common in older dogs. "Robert, we can treat him with medication and a special diet. It could give him a few more good months. And after that? Robert, you know your dogs better than anyone. When the time comes, you'll know." Robert gave Buddy extra care, preparing special meals, taking him on shorter, gentler walks, massaging his sore joints. Duke seemed to understand his brother was sick. He stayed close, sharing his food when Buddy couldn't eat, warming him with his body on cold nights. 3 months. Later, on a fall morning, Robert woke to find Buddy unable to stand. The dog looked at him with a tired expression, as if wanting to apologize for no longer having the strength. Robert picked up Buddy in his arms and took him to the vet. The diagnosis was clear. The dog's body was failing. There was no treatment left. "Robert, he's suffering. The most humane thing would be—" "I know, doctor." Robert spent the last hours with Buddy in the backyard, lying on the grass where they had played together so many times. Duke stayed beside them like an honor guard. "Buddy, you were the bravest dog I ever knew," Robert whispered. "Remember when you got sick as a puppy? I promised I'd never abandon you. And I'm not abandoning you now. I'm letting you rest." Buddy lifted his head with effort, and licked Robert's hand one last time. His brown eyes, which had always shone with joy, closed peacefully. Robert cried as he hadn't since childhood. Duke moved closer and rested his head on his owner's lap, offering the only comfort he could. Buddy's funeral was simple but moving. Robert buried him in the backyard, under the tree where he loved to rest. Several people who had known Buddy from the therapy program came to say goodbye. Peter, the autistic boy, brought a drawing he had made of Buddy. "Uncle Robert, now Buddy's a doggy angel. He'll take care of sick kids in heaven." The simplicity of a child's faith comforted Robert. Maybe Peter was right. Maybe Buddy was still looking after people, just in a different place. Duke was visibly depressed after his brother's death. He searched the house for Buddy, slept in his usual spots, and lost interest in the activities he once loved. Robert understood that Duke was grieving, just like humans do. He decided to give the dog time to process the loss. 2 weeks after Buddy's passing, Robert got an unexpected call. It was from a kennel specializing in golden retrievers. "Mr. Johnson, we heard about Buddy's passing. We wanted to offer our condolences and make a proposal." "What proposal?" "We have a young female, 2 years old, who was returned by her owners because they moved overseas. She needs a new home and we thought she might keep Duke company." At first, Robert refused. No dog could replace Buddy. But then he reconsidered. Maybe Duke really did need companionship. He went to meet the female. Her name was Moon Golden. Like Duke and Buddy, with a gentle and affectionate temperament. When Robert brought Moon home, Duke showed cautious interest. He sniffed the new arrival, kept a respectful distance, but showed no hostility. In the days that followed, Moon gradually earned Duke's trust. She respected his grief, never forcing play, just offering quiet companionship. Robert noticed Moon had a natural instinct for therapy. She was especially gentle with sad or sick people, as if she knew exactly what they needed. He decided to train her for the therapy program. Moon learned quickly, showing exceptional intelligence and sensitivity. 6 months after Moon's arrival, Robert introduced the new therapy pair, Duke, the seasoned veteran, and Moon, the young trainee. The reception was excellent. Moon brought fresh energy to the program, while Duke offered the wisdom of experience. Peter, the autistic boy, was instantly taken with Moon. "Uncle Robert, I think Buddy sent her to take care of us." Once again, the child's perspective touched Robert deeply. Maybe Peter was right again. Duke accepted Moon as family, but Robert noticed their relationship was different from what he'd had with Buddy. Duke and Buddy were brothers who had grown up together. Duke and Moon were companions who chose to share their lives. A year after Moon arrived, Robert Johnson turned 60. His colleagues organized a surprise party at the Institute. "Professor Robert, we want to thank you for everything you've taught us about loving animals," said his lead assistant. "And for the examples set by Duke and Moon," added another colleague. Robert looked at Duke, now 12 years old, still active but visibly aging. Moon at 3 was at the peak of her energy and therapeutic abilities. "Thank you all, but I want to make it clear, we're the ones who learn." "They're the ones who teach," he said, pointing to the dogs. "I just learned to listen." The party was joyful, but Robert couldn't shake the thought that it might be one of the last celebrations with Duke. 2 months later, on a cold July morning, exactly 11 years after that first meeting on the road, Robert woke to find Duke very weak. The aging dog had been up all night, panting and restless. His eyes showed deep exhaustion. Robert took Duke to Dr. Paul. The diagnosis was similar to Buddy's. His body was beginning to fail. "Robert, this time we might have a little longer. Maybe a few months with medication and special care." Robert began an intensive care routine for Duke: daily medication, special meals, canine physical therapy, veterinary acupuncture. Moon showed an impressive understanding of the situation, staying close to Duke, as if wanting to absorb every bit of wisdom from her mentor before it was too late. During those months, Robert documented every special moment with Duke: photos, videos, audio recordings of the sounds the dog made. On a particularly beautiful afternoon, Robert took Duke for one last visit to the children's hospital. The old dog, though weak, perked up when he saw the children he'd known for years. "Caroline, The girl who'd met Duke during her cancer treatment and was now 15 and healthy, came especially to say goodbye. "Uncle Robert, Duke saved my life when I was little," she said, gently petting the dog. "Now I'm studying to get into vet school. I'll carry on your work." Duke rested his head in Caroline's lap, just as he had when she was a sick child. But now it was he who needed comfort. "Duke, thank you for everything," Caroline whispered. "I'll never forget you." On the way home, Robert stopped the car at the same spot on the road where he'd first found Duke and Buddy as puppies. The pole was still there, a little more weathered by time. The landscape was the same: pine trees, asphalt, solitude. "Remember this place, Duke?" Robert cradled the dog and walked toward the pole. "This is where we met. You and Buddy were shivering from the cold, and I thought I was saving you." Duke sniffed the air as if recognizing something familiar. "Now I know it was you who saved me," Robert continued. "You saved me from a life without purpose, taught me unconditional love, showed me who I really am." Robert stood there for a few minutes, holding Duke and remembering everything they'd been through together. 11 years of companionship, challenges, joy, transformation. "Thank you, Duke, for everything." A week later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Robert woke to find Duke unable to move. The dog struggled to breathe, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Robert lay down beside Duke on the living room floor. Moon came over and did the same on the other side. "Duke, my friend, my child, and my teacher." Robert stroked the dog's head. "You were the greatest gift life ever gave me." With immense effort, Duke lifted his head to look into Robert's eyes one last time. In that gaze was gratitude, love, and a kind of peace. "You can rest now, Duke. You've done your job." He cared for hundreds of people, taught me to be a better person, and was the best dog anyone could ask for. Duke lowered his head peacefully and closed his eyes. His breathing slowed until it stopped completely. Robert hugged Duke's body and cried every tear he had held back. Moon whimpered softly, as if she understood she had lost her mentor. Duke's funeral was even more moving than Buddy's. Hundreds of people attended, patients who had known, the dog, family members, healthcare professionals, veterinary students. Robert buried Duke beside Buddy under the same tree. He placed a simple plaque: "Duke and Buddy, brothers, heroes, teachers of love." In the months that followed, Robert battled deep depression. Without Duke and Buddy, he felt an essential part of himself had died. Moon became his emotional support. The young dog showed impressive maturity, offering silent comfort in the hardest moments. Gradually, Robert realized his mission hadn't ended with the dog's passing. Duke and Buddy left a legacy that needed to be preserved and expanded. He returned to work at the Institute with renewed energy, training new therapy dogs, mentoring more professionals, and expanding the program to other regions. Moon became an excellent therapist, displaying many traits she had learned by observing Duke. It was as if the veteran dog had passed his knowledge to his protégé. Robert finished his book, Memories of Duke and Buddy. The work became a bestseller, inspiring thousands to pursue animal-assisted therapy. One afternoon, while signing copies at a bookstore, an elderly woman approached him. "Professor Robert, I want to tell you a story." "Of course, Mom. My grandson has severe autism. 5 years ago, when he was 7, he met Duke at a hospital. It was the first time I ever saw my grandson smile." The woman grew emotional. "Professor, that meeting changed his life. He started communicating better, became calmer, even accepted physical touch." "I'm so happy to hear that." "Professor, he's 12 now and says he wants to be a vet to care for dogs like Duke when he grows up. You saved my grandson." Robert was deeply moved. "Ma'am, it was Duke who saved your grandson. I was just there." "Professor, Duke was special because he had a special owner. Animals reflect the love they receive." Her words summed up everything Robert had learned. True love multiplies, becomes healing, and lives on through others. 5 years after Duke's passing, Robert turned 65. The Helen Wilson Institute had become an international leader in animal-assisted therapy. Moon, now 8, remained active as a senior therapist, training younger dogs and handling special cases. Robert found a new purpose, shaping the next generation of human and canine therapists. His university classes were in high demand, and his workshops were sought worldwide. At an international lecture on animal-assisted therapy, Robert closed his talk with a reflection. 15 years ago, I found 2 abandoned puppies on a frozen road. I thought I was saving 2 lives, but I discovered they saved mine. I learned that true love isn't possessive, it sets free. It isn't conditional, it's endless. It isn't fleeting, it's eternal. The audience of vets and psychologists from 20 countries gave an emotional ovation. Afterward, a young Brazilian vet approached him. "Professor, my name is Caroline. You've known me since I was a child." Robert studied her face and recognized her. "Caroline, the girl who met Duke at the hospital." "That's right," she beamed. "I just graduated as a veterinarian, specializing in animal-assisted therapy. All because of you and Duke." Robert Johnson was deeply moved. "Caroline, how is your health?" "Perfect. 10 years without any issues. The doctors say I'm a miracle." "Caroline, you've always been a miracle. Duke just helped you remember that." Caroline hugged Robert affectionately. "Professor, I want to work with you. I want to carry on Duke and Buddy's legacy." Robert felt the circle closing. The girl who had been healed by Duke's therapy was now returning as a professional to continue the work. "Caroline, it would be an honor to have you on the team." But life, as always, had new challenges in store for Robert. 2 weeks after Caroline started working at the Institute, Robert received a notification that shook him to the core. The city had decided to appropriate the land where the Institute stood to build an avenue. Robert had 6 months to find another location. "Professor, this is unfair," Caroline protested. "The Institute is a city treasure." "Caroline, I've learned that life always tests our ability to start over," Robert said, trying to stay calm. Finding another suitable place seemed impossible. The Institute needed a large space, a backyard for the dogs, easy access for patients, and Robert didn't have the funds to buy property. Weeks passed with no solution. Robert visited dozens of places, but they were either too small, too expensive, or in unsuitable areas. Moon sensed Robert's stress and became even more affectionate, as if trying to comfort him. At night, she slept curled up against him, offering warmth and companionship. 2 months before the final eviction deadline, Robert received an unexpected offer. A real estate company wanted to buy not just the land, but the entire Institute project. "Mr. Johnson, our company wants to expand into alternative therapies," the real estate representative explained. "We can offer $1 million for the Institute, including the methodology, the dogs, everything." It was an astronomical sum, more money than Robert had ever dreamed of having, but something about the offer bothered him. What about the dogs? What happens to the therapy work? Oh, that would continue. We'd have professional veterinarians and psychologists handling everything. And me. You could stay on as a consultant if you'd like, but honestly, at your age, maybe it's better to retire and enjoy the money. Robert asked for time to think. The offer solved all his financial problems, but something inside him rejected the idea. He talked to Caroline about it. "Professor, financially it's tempting, but would you really trust your life's work to businessmen?" "That's exactly what worries me, Caroline. They see the Institute as a business. For us, it's a life's mission. Professor, what if we look for other options? Crowdfunding, partnerships with universities, support from NGOs." Robert was inspired by Caroline's suggestions. Together, they launched a campaign to save the Institute. They created heartfelt videos telling Duke and Buddy's story, documented successful therapy cases, and mobilized social media. The response was overwhelming. In 2 weeks, the campaign went viral. People from all over the United States began donating, from small, symbolic amounts to significant sums. But what touched Robert the most were the messages of support. Hundreds of people shared how his work had impacted their lives or their loved ones. "Professor Johnson, my autistic daughter met Moon at the hospital. It was the first time she smiled in months. Mr. Johnson, my father met Duke before he passed away. That was the happiest moment of his last few days. Professor, Your dogs taught me that I can still be happy even after losing my wife. The messages multiplied, creating a web of gratitude that spread across the country. The campaign caught the media's attention. Robert was interviewed on television shows, national newspapers, and specialty magazines. In one particularly emotional interview, the host asked, "Professor Robert, what would you say to those who think such dedication to animals is excessive?" Robert thought about the question, remembering all the difficult moments he had been through. "I'd say love is never excessive. Love is the only force capable of turning suffering into healing, abandonment into purpose, loneliness into family." The interview was watched by millions. The next day, donations to save the institute tripled, but they still needed money to buy suitable land. Robert began considering the possibility of accepting the real estate company's offer. That's when he got a call that changed everything. "Robert, this is Dr. Maurice." It took Robert a moment to place the name. Dr. Maurice, the vet who wanted to adopt Duke and Buddy 15 years ago, remember? "Of course. How are you, doctor?" "Robert, I saw your interviews on TV. I want to make a proposal." Robert listened closely. "I have a 5-acre property in Bloomington I no longer use. I want to donate it to the institute." Robert couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Doctor, are you serious?" "Completely serious. My wife passed last year. My daughter lives abroad. That property is abandoned, but it has a big house, kennels, everything you need. Doctor, why would you do this?" "Robert, 15 years ago, I offered to adopt your dogs. You refused because you knew they were your responsibility. Now I see. You were right. Duke and Buddy did something with you they never would have done with us." Robert was moved. "Doctor, I don't know how to thank you." "Robert, no need to thank me. This is my way of honoring Duke and Buddy. They deserve to have their work continue." Dr. Maurice's donation solved the location problem. The property in Bloomington was perfect, spacious, airy, with proper facilities and easy access. Robert organized the move with the help of volunteers who knew his work. Hundreds showed up to help transport equipment, clean the new headquarters, and organize the spaces. Moon supervised everything curiously, exploring every corner of the new property. Robert noticed she approved of the place. There was plenty of room to run, trees for shade, and a positive energy dogs always sense before humans do. The inauguration of the new headquarters was an emotional celebration. Former and current patients, healthcare professionals, local officials, and journalists attended. Robert gave a simple but touching speech. "This home is dedicated to the memory of Duke and Buddy, 2 puppies who taught me that small acts of love can change the world." Caroline presented the Institute's new projects: a therapist training program, scientific research on animal therapy benefits, and partnerships with international universities. Professor Robert created something far more than an institute, Caroline told the crowd. He created a life philosophy based on unconditional love. In the following months, the new institute thrived beyond expectations. Robert's story with the dogs had touched influential people, leading to important partnerships and stable funding. Robert received invitations to speak at global conferences, European universities, and international health organizations. But what made him proudest were the small daily miracles: children smiling again, elders finding joy, adults overcoming trauma through animal therapy. Moon became a respected veteran, overseeing the training of new therapy dogs. Robert watched how she had matured, developing the same wisdom that Duke possessed. One special afternoon, Robert received a visit from Peter, the autistic boy who had met Duke years before. Peter was now an 18-year-old young man, about to start college. "Uncle Robert, I came to thank you for everything Duke did for me," said Peter, showing social skills he hadn't had as a child. "Peter, how are you?" "I'm good, Uncle Robert. I'm going to study psychology. I want to work with autistic children like I used to be." Robert was moved seeing Peter's transformation. "Peter, Duke would be proud of you." "Uncle Robert, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you know Duke and Buddy were special that day on the road?" Robert thought about the question. "Peter, I don't think I knew. I just felt they needed me. And I found out I needed them too." So it was fate. Peter, I'd rather believe it was love. Fate is when we have no choice. Love is when we choose, even when it's hard. Peter smiled. Uncle Robert, you taught me that autism isn't a flaw. It's a difference. And differences can be gifts. Peter's words summed up the entire philosophy Robert had developed over the years. Differences aren't obstacles, they're opportunities for growth. At the end of that year, Robert turned 70. His team organized a special celebration at the Institute. Professor, we have a surprise for you, said Caroline. She led Robert to the backyard, where there was a bronze statue of Duke and Buddy as puppies, exactly as Robert had found them on the road. Professor, this statue will stay here forever, reminding everyone that small acts of love can create big changes. Robert was deeply moved. The statue perfectly captured the innocence and vulnerability of the puppies, but also the strength they had shown in transforming so many lives. Caroline, Moon, all of you. Robert was visibly emotional. You've preserved something I thought would die with me. Professor, Duke and Buddy's legacy is immortal. Every child healed, every adult comforted, every professional inspired keeps their memory alive. That night, Robert stayed alone at the Institute, with only Moon by his side. They sat in front of the statue of Duke and Buddy, watching the stars. Moon, do you think they'd be proud of what we've built? Robert asked. Moon moved closer and rested her head on his lap, just as Duke used to do when Robert needed comfort. Robert understood the answer was right there, in the unconditional affection Moon gave him. Duke and Buddy had planted seeds of love that kept growing through other dogs, other humans, other stories. 2 years later, Robert faced a new challenge, his own health. During a routine checkup, doctors detected a heart condition that required surgery. Professor Robert, it's a complex surgery, but your chances of success are good, the cardiologist explained. You'll need to prepare for a few weeks of recovery. Robert wasn't worried about himself, but about Moon and the Institute. Doctor, I have responsibilities. Professor, your only responsibility now is taking care of your health. Let others handle the rest. Caroline temporarily took over the Institute. Professor, we'll take care of everything. You just focus on getting better. Moon showed special concern for Robert in the days leading up to the surgery. She stayed by his side, as if trying to protect him from some invisible danger. The night before the surgery, Robert talked to Moon for a long time. Girl, if anything happens to me, you'll be okay. Caroline and the team will take care of you. Moon looked at him attentively, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. Moon, I want you to know you've been so important in my life. After Duke and Buddy passed, I thought I'd never feel such deep love for an animal again. You proved me wrong. The surgery was more complicated than expected. Robert spent 3 weeks in the ICU, hovering between life and death. Moon never left the hospital, waiting in the courtyard for news. Caroline visited Robert daily. Professor, Moon won't eat properly. She knows you're here. During the critical period, Robert had intense dreams. He saw Duke and Buddy young again, running through a lush field. They looked at him fondly, as if to say it wasn't yet time for them to reunite. When he finally woke, the first thing Robert asked for was to see Moon. The doctors allowed a special visit in his room. Moon ran in and carefully jumped onto the bed, showering him with joyful licks without hurting him. It was as if she knew exactly where he was injured. Moon, my girl! Robert hugged her with what little strength he had. You waited for me. Robert's recovery was slow but steady. Moon became his constant companion during physical therapy, offering motivation in the toughest moments. Professor, Moon is better than any medicine, one of the nurses remarked. I've never seen an animal so devoted to its owner. 3 months after the surgery, Robert had fully recovered. The doctors were amazed by his progress. Professor Robert, your will to live is remarkable, the cardiologist said. Few patients your age recover so well. Robert knew his strength came from the purpose he'd found in life. He had important work to do, people who depended on him, and Moon, who needed his care. When he returned to the Institute, he was greeted with celebration. Patients, staff, and volunteers all wanted to hug the professor who had won yet another battle. Professor, "We have a surprise for you," Caroline said. She led him to a new room built during his absence, a memorial dedicated to Duke and Buddy, filled with photos, videos, and testimonials from people whose lives the dogs had touched. "Professor, we created this space so future generations will know Duke and Buddy's story." Robert walked through the memorial, moved. There were photos of the trembling puppies on the roadside, videos of them working in the hospital, and heartfelt words from hundreds they had helped. On a special wall, framed, was the letter Robert had written to Duke and Buddy that night on the beach years before. "How did you get this letter?" Robert asked. "Professor, you left it in the notebook where you recorded therapy cases. We thought it deserved to be preserved." Robert reread his own words written years ago when Duke and Buddy were still alive. The words still held true. They had been the best part of his life. In that moment, Robert understood his story wasn't ending in tragedy, but in triumph. He had kept his promise to two puppies on a frozen road. He would never abandon them. And more than that, he had turned that love into something greater, helping hundreds and ensuring Duke and Buddy's memory would live on. 6 months later, Robert received a call that stunned him. "Professor Robert, this is the White House. The President wishes to award you the National Medal of Science." Robert couldn't believe it. "There must be a mistake. I'm not a scientist." "Professor, your contributions to animal-assisted therapy are recognized worldwide. You've earned this honor." The ceremony in Washington, D.C. was emotional. Robert, accompanied by Caroline and Moon, received the medal from the President himself. "Professor Robert, you represent the best of the United States, the ability to turn love into concrete action for the good of society," the President said during the ceremony. Robert gave a brief speech. "This medal isn't mine, it belongs to two dogs named Duke and Buddy, who taught me that small acts of love can change the world." The ceremony was broadcast nationwide. Robert became a symbol of dedication to animals and personal triumph. But for him, the greatest reward remained his daily work at the Institute, watching Moon and other dogs bring joy to people in need. 3 years after his heart surgery, Robert was 73 and in stable health. Moon, now 14, was beginning to show signs of old age. Robert knew he would soon have to say goodbye to another loyal companion. But this time he was prepared. He had learned that true love doesn't end with death. It becomes a legacy. On a special winter afternoon, exactly 20 years after, finding Duke and Buddy on the road, Robert organized a celebration at the Institute. 20 years ago, 2 abandoned puppies changed my life forever, Robert told the crowd. Today, hundreds of children smile, seniors find companionship, and young people discover their calling because of that encounter. Caroline spoke up. "Professor, Robert taught us that we shouldn't measure the value of a life by how long it lasts, but by the impact it makes." The celebration brought together people from across the country, former patients, professionals trained at the Institute, and families touched by the therapy. Peter, now a psychologist working with autistic children, gave an emotional testimony. "Professor Robert, Duke taught me that being different can be a gift. Today, I help other children see that their flaws can be superpowers." A young mother approached Robert with her 5-year-old daughter. "Professor, my daughter has Down syndrome. I'd love for Moon to meet her." "Of course, Moon loves meeting children." The little girl shyly approached Moon. The elderly dog, though slower now, showed her usual gentleness with special needs children. "Pretty Moon," the girl said, stroking her golden fur. Moon lay down to be at the child's level, making it easier to connect. The girl laughed with pure joy, a sound that moved everyone present. Robert watched the scene and understood that this moment captured his entire journey. Love transforming lives, healing wounds, and creating connections. That night, after all the guests had left, Robert sat alone with Moon in the Institute's backyard. They settled in front of the statue of Duke and Buddy, as they often did. "Moon, did you see how far we've come?" Robert said, stroking her head. "When I found your predecessors on that road, I never imagined we'd make it here." Moon listened intently, as she always did when Robert spoke nostalgically. "You know the most important thing I've learned, Moon. Love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice. Every day I choose to love you, every day you choose to love me. It's that daily choice that builds real families." A gentle breeze rustled the trees in the yard. Robert had the sense that Duke and Buddy were there, approving all that had been built in their memory. "Duke, Buddy," Robert whispered, gazing at the statue. "Thank you for choosing me that cold morning. Thank you for teaching me who I really am." Moon leaned closer to Robert, offering warmth and companionship. At 73, Robert knew his life had been extraordinary, not because of professional success, but because of the bonds of love he had built. 2 months after that special celebration, on a quiet September morning, Robert woke up and noticed that Moon couldn't get up. The 14-year-old dog was visibly tired, breathing with difficulty. Robert gently carried her to the vet. "Robert, Moon is in her final stage," said Dr. Paul, now an elderly man who had been caring for Robert's family for 2 decades. "Her heart is very weak." "How much time does she have, doctor?" "It could be today, it could be next week. But not much longer than that." Robert took Moon back home, knowing it would be the last time. On the way, she rested her head on his lap, just as she had done since she was a puppy. Caroline and the Institute's team took turns keeping Robert and Moon company in those final days. Everyone understood they were witnessing the end of an era. "Professor, Moon was a great teacher to all of us," said Caroline. "She learned from Duke and taught us." Robert spent the last 72 hours constantly by Moon's side. He talked to her about all the happy moments they had shared, the people she had helped, and how proud he was of her. "Moon, you were the bridge between the past and the future," Robert whispered. "You carried Duke and Buddy's wisdom and passed it on to a new generation." On a sunny Tuesday morning, Moon looked into Robert's eyes one last time, as if she wanted to forever remember the face that had loved her unconditionally. "You can go now, girl," Robert said, stroking her head. "Duke and Buddy are waiting for you. Tell them we fulfilled our mission." Moon took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed until it stopped completely. Robert held Moon's body and cried, but these were different tears from the ones he had shed for Duke and Buddy. They were tears of gratitude for the privilege of loving and being loved by 3 extraordinary dogs. Moon's funeral was simple, but moving. Robert buried her beside Duke and Buddy, under the same tree that sheltered the 3 great loves of his life. "Professor, we'll all miss Moon," said one of the vets on the team. "Moon isn't gone," Robert replied. "She's just joined Duke and Buddy, and together they keep inspiring the work we do here." In the months after Moon's passing, Robert faced deep melancholy. For the first time in 20 years, he was alone without a canine companion. Caroline suggested he adopt another dog, but Robert refused. "Caroline, some loves are one of a kind. Duke, Buddy, and Moon were my family. I can't replace them." "But, Professor, you're so alone." "Caroline, I'm not alone. I have you. I have the Institute. I have the memories of a life lived with purpose." Robert threw himself fully into training work. He began traveling across the country, teaching professionals, always sharing the story of Duke, Buddy, and Moon. His lectures became famous for their emotional depth. Robert didn't just teach therapeutic techniques, he shared a philosophy of life based on unconditional love. "Animal-assisted therapy works because animals are masters at loving without conditions," Robert said in his talks. "They don't judge our appearance, our social status, or our limitations. They just love." A year after Moon's death, Robert received a special invitation to give a lecture at Yale University on animal-assisted therapy. "Professor Robert, it would be an honor to have you here," said the program coordinator. "Your story has inspired researchers worldwide." Robert accepted the invitation. At 74, he traveled to the United States to share his experience with students and professors at one of the world's most prestigious universities. The lecture at Yale became a milestone in Robert's career. He told his full story, from the encounter on the road to the building of the Institute. 21 years ago, I was an unemployed truck driver with no prospects," Robert said to the audience of academics. 2 abandoned puppies turned me into the person standing before you today at Yale." The crowd was moved by the simplicity and depth of his story. After the lecture, dozens of students approached to ask questions and express admiration. A young veterinary student asked, Professor Robert, what would you say to someone who wants to make a difference in the world but doesn't know where to start? Robert smiled. Start where you are, with what you have. I started with 2 puppies on Niue, a frozen road. You can begin with an act of love today. The trip to Yale left a deep mark on Robert. He realized his story had transcended borders, inspiring people across continents. When he returned to the United States, he brought back invitations for international partnerships, funding for research, and global recognition for the Institute. Professor, you've become a worldwide reference, Caroline said. Universities in several countries want to replicate your model. Caroline, that means Duke, Buddy, and Moon will keep saving lives even after they're gone. Robert spent the next 2 years traveling the world, establishing partnerships and training professionals. The Institute's model was adopted in hospitals across 15 countries. But despite his international success, Robert felt something was missing in his life. The big house felt empty, the yard too quiet, the nights too long. It was during one of those lonely nights that Robert made an important decision. He visited the municipal animal shelter, the same place where he had once considered taking Duke and Buddy decades earlier. Mr. Robert, the employee recognized him immediately. What an honor to have you here. I came looking for a dog who needs me, Robert said simply. Sir, we have dozens of dogs waiting for adoption. What kind are you looking for? One that no one else wants. One who's lost hope, one who needs a second chance. The employee led him to the back kennels, where the older or sickly animals stayed. Mr. Robert, this one here is Thunder. He's 8 years old and has been here 6 months. He's very gentle, but people prefer puppies. Robert looked at Thunder, a large mixed breed with dark fur and sad eyes. The dog lay at the back of the kennel, as if he'd given up on being noticed. May I go inside? Of course, Robert entered and sat on the floor. Thunder watched him curiously but didn't approach. Hi, Thunder, my name is Robert. I came to meet you. Robert stayed there for an hour, quietly talking to the dog. Gradually, Thunder inched closer, until he allowed Robert to pet his head. Thunder, would you like to come live with me? I have a big house with a yard, good food, and lots of love to give. The dog looked at him, as if he understood every word. For the first time in months, Thunder wagged his tail. Robert took Thunder home that same day. The dog cautiously explored the property, as if he couldn't believe his luck. Thunder, welcome to the family, Robert said, showing him the yard where Duke, Buddy, and Moon had once run and played. Thunder was a gentle and grateful dog. Clearly mistreated in the past, he flinched at sudden movements and loud noises. But he responded to Robert's affection with touching devotion. I see you're a survivor too, Thunder, Robert said one night, stroking the dog sleeping at his feet. We'll take care of each other. Thunder's arrival brought new energy to Robert. He had company on walks again, someone to talk to during meals, warmth at his feet on cold nights. Caroline was happy to see Robert more lively. Professor, Thunder has been a blessing. You look younger. Caroline, I've learned it's never too late to start over. At 75, I can still build a new family. Thunder adapted quickly to the Institute's routine. He was calm with the children, respectful toward the other dogs, and showed a natural instinct for therapy. Professor, Thunder has therapeutic potential, observed one of the team's veterinarians. Let's train him then. He deserves the chance to help others, just like Duke, Buddy, and Moon did. Thunder's training was remarkable. Despite his age and traumatic past, he quickly learned commands and showed extraordinary empathy with patience. Professor, Thunder is special, Caroline said after a therapy session. He understands suffering in a way other dogs don't. It was true. Thunder had a unique connection with people who had endured trauma, as if he recognized their pain and wanted to comfort them. In his first year of therapeutic work, Thunder stood out in caring for domestic violence survivors, refugees, and children in shelters. Thunder teaches us that those who've suffered can be the best comforters, Robert noted. He turns his pain into healing for others. 2 years after adopting Thunder, Robert turned 77. His health was stable, the Institute was thriving, and he felt fulfilled both professionally and personally. One special July morning, exactly 25 years after finding Duke and Buddy on the road, Robert decided to take a nostalgic trip. He drove to the exact spot where it all began. The pole was still there, more weathered by time. The road had been repaved, but the landscape held the same melancholy beauty. Robert parked the car and stepped out with Thunder. They walked to the pole where, 25 years earlier, 2 puppies had shivered in the cold. "Thunder, this is where my life changed forever," Robert said, touching the old pole. 2 little dogs were abandoned right here. Thunder sniffed the pole curiously, as if he could still catch Duke and Buddy's scent. Robert sat on the grass and took in the view. In 25 years, he'd gone from an unemployed truck driver to a world-renowned figure in animal-assisted therapy. He'd lost and gained families, faced financial struggles and professional triumphs, lived through moments of despair and absolute victory. But above all, he'd learned to love unconditionally. And that love had multiplied, helping thousands through therapeutic work. "Duke, Buddy, Moonda," Robert whispered, looking up at the sky. "Thank you for making me a better person." Thunder moved closer and rested his head on Robert's lap, offering comfort as if he knew this was a special moment. "And you, Thunder," Robert continued, stroking the dog. "Thank you for teaching me it's never too late to begin again." Robert stayed there for 2 hours, reliving every important moment of his journey. When he stood to leave, he felt a deep peace. He'd kept every promise he'd made to himself and to the dogs. He'd never abandoned them, always fought for them, and turned his love into something greater that helped others. On the way back, Robert stopped at a florist and bought 3 yellow roses. When he reached the institute, he went to Duke, Buddy, and Moon's graves and placed a rose on each. "Boys, Moon, today marks 25 years since we met. What a journey we've shared." Thunder sat respectfully beside Robert, as if understanding the solemnity of the moment. "I want you to know there hasn't been a single day I haven't been proud of the choices I made for you. Every sacrifice was worth it. Every hardship made us stronger. Every victory was shared." Robert remained there until sunset, talking to his departed friends, telling them about Thunder, about the institute, about all the lives that had been transformed. When he finally stood up, Robert knew he was ready for the next chapter of his life. At 77, he still had energy for a few more years of work, a few more lives to change. "Come on, Thunder," Robert said. "We have work to do." They walked toward the house as the first stars appeared in the sky. Robert felt complete, fulfilled, at peace with himself. He had found his purpose in life through the love of 2 abandoned puppies. And that purpose would live on through the people he had trained, the animals he had worked with, the institutions he had inspired. The story of Robert, Duke, Buddy, Moon, and Thunder was living proof that true love can overcome any obstacle, turn tragedy into triumph, and create legacies that outlast life itself. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. 3 years had passed since that nostalgic visit to the road. Robert, now 80, remained active but had significantly reduced his workload. Thunder at 11 was still his faithful companion and even participated in special therapy sessions. One Monday morning, Robert received a call that moved him deeply. "Professor Robert, it's Peter." Robert smiled, recognizing the voice. "Peter, how are you?" "I'm great, Professor. I called to share some news. I'm getting married." "Peter, that's wonderful. What's her name?" "Anna. She's also a psychologist and works with special needs children. We met at an autism conference." Robert was touched. Peter, the autistic boy who had met Duke at 12, was now a successful 25-year-old man about to marry. "Professor, I'd like to invite you to be the best man at the wedding." Robert was surprised. "Peter, it would be an immense honor." "Professor, you and Duke changed my life. I want you to be part of this special moment." "Peter, I'll be there with great pride." Peter's wedding took place on a sunny spring Saturday. Robert arrived dressed elegantly, accompanied by Thunder, who wore a special bow tie for the occasion. During the ceremony, Peter made sure to mention Robert in his speech. "I want to thank Professor Robert and the dearly missed Duke, who taught me that being different can be a superpower." The audience applauded, moved. Many present knew Robert's story and understood the significance of the moment. At the reception, Anna, the bride, approached Robert. "Professor, Peter told me all about your story. Thank you for taking such good care of him when he was a child. Anna, Peter was always special. Duke just helped him see that. Professor, Peter said he wants to name our first son Duke, if it's a boy. Robert was deeply moved. That would be a beautiful tribute. 2 years later, Peter and Anna had their first child, a healthy boy named Duke Peter. Robert was invited to be the honorary grandfather. Professor, this little Duke will grow up knowing the story of the original Duke, Peter said, placing the baby in Robert's arms. Robert held the baby gently, thinking about the circle of life. A dog had changed Peter's life, and now Peter honored that dog by naming his son after him. Little Duke, Robert whispered to the baby, you carry a special name. Duke was a dog who taught many people how to love. In that moment, Robert understood that his story would not end with his death. It would live on through the people he had touched, the children who would be named after his dogs, the institutions that would carry on his work. At 82, Robert faced a new reality. Thunder was showing signs of old age. The 13-year-old dog moved more slowly, slept more, and had less interest in activities. Robert knew he would soon have to say goodbye to another companion. But this time, he was prepared to make their farewell a celebration of the life they had shared. Thunder, you were my last great canine love, Robert said one afternoon, stroking the dog as he rested in the sun. You taught me it's never too late to start over, that love heals old wounds, that gratitude can transform any life. Thunder looked at him affectionately, as he always did when Robert spoke in that tender tone. During Thunder's final months, Robert made sure to give him every possible joy. Trips to the beach, special meals, long cuddle sessions. I want your last days to be the best of your life, Robert promised. On a quiet autumn morning, Robert woke to find that Thunder had passed in his sleep. The dog lay on his favorite bed, his expression peaceful. Robert found him like that, and knew immediately that Thunder had chosen to go without drama, without suffering, simply drifting away in peace. Thank you, my friend, Robert whispered, stroking Thunder one last time. Thank you for making my final years so special. Thunder's funeral was simple but moving. Robert buried him beside Duke, Buddy, and Moon, completing the circle of the canine family he had loved for nearly 3 decades. Now you're all together, Robert said, standing before the 4 graves. Take care of each other just like you always did. After Thunder's passing, Robert made a final decision. He would not adopt another dog. At 82, he knew he likely wouldn't have enough time to give a new animal all the love it deserved. Caroline, my time as a dog guardian is over, Robert said. Now I want to devote myself entirely to preserving their legacy. Robert spent his remaining active years writing books, giving talks, and securing the future of the Institute. He wanted to ensure his life's work would thrive long after he was gone. At 85, Robert finished his autobiography, 4 Paws, 1 Heart, The Love Story That Changed My Life. The book became an international bestseller, translated into 15 languages. Professor, you've inspired an entire generation of therapists, said Caroline, now 40, and the national director of the Animal-Assisted Therapy Program. Caroline, I just planted a seed. You all made it grow and bear fruit. At the book launch, Robert gave his final public talk. At 85, he still spoke with clarity and passion as he shared his story. 35 years ago, I found 2 puppies on the road and thought I was saving 2 lives, Robert told the packed audience. Now I understand they saved mine, and through me they saved thousands more. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Robert had become a living legend, a symbol of devotion to animals and personal transformation. After the talk, an 8-year-old girl approached him. Grandpa Robert, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. Robert knelt to meet her at eye level. What's your name? Sophie. I have Down syndrome and I met therapy dogs at the hospital. Sophie, do you want to be a vet? I want to take care of dogs that help sad people. Robert's eyes welled up. Sophie, you're already doing it. Your smile brightens anyone's. See, the girl laughed and hugged him. In that moment, Robert knew his mission was truly complete. He had inspired not only professionals, but also children who would grow up carrying forward the values they had learned from Duke, Buddy, Moon, and Thunder. 2 years later, at 87, Robert faced more serious health issues. His mobility decreased, but his mind remained sharp and his spirit strong. Caroline visited him daily at home, where Robert had chosen to spend his final days surrounded by memories of an extraordinary life. "Professor, do you have any regrets?" Caroline asked one afternoon. Robert smiled. "Caroline, if I could live it all again, I'd do everything the same. Every tough choice, every sacrifice, every moment of pain, it was all worth it. And what if that morning you had just kept driving down the road? Then I would have missed the best part of my life. Duke and Buddy gave me purpose, family, joy. They made me a better person." Robert spent his days sitting on the porch, watching the backyard where his 4 dogs had once played. He could almost see them running through the grass, chasing sticks, napping under the shade of the trees. "Boys, Moon, Thunder, E," Robert whispered. "We'll be together again soon." On a bright July morning, exactly 37 years after meeting Duke and Buddy on the road, Robert woke feeling different. It wasn't physical pain, but a kind of inner calling. He asked Caroline to come see him. "Caroline, my dear, the time has come." "Professor, don't say that." "Caroline, it's not sadness, it's gratitude. I've lived a full life, with purpose, surrounded by love." Robert had prepared farewell letters for all the important people in his life. For Peter, for Anna, for little Duke, for hundreds of former patients. But the most special letter was addressed to his 4 dogs. "My dear Duke, Buddy, Moon and Thunder, in a few hours we'll be together again. What joy it will be to hold you. Thank you for making me the man I became. Thank you for teaching me that true love has no conditions or limits. Because of you, hundreds of children smiled, elders found companionship, adults overcame trauma. Because of you, I discovered my life had a greater purpose. Now I'll rest, knowing we planted seeds of love that will keep growing for generations. Wait for me, I've missed you so much. With all my love, Robert." That special afternoon, Robert lay in his bed surrounded by photos of Duke, Buddy, Moon and Thunder. Caroline held his hand, offering comfort in his final moments. "Professor, you were a gift to all of us," Caroline whispered. "Caroline, keep caring for the animals. They still have so much love to give." Robert closed his eyes with a peaceful smile. He could feel the presence of his 4 companions drawing near, ready to welcome him back into the family. His last words were, "Duke, Buddy, Moon, Thunder. You waited for me." Robert passed peacefully at 87, knowing he had lived an extraordinary life built on unconditional love. His funeral was a celebration of life, attended by thousands. Patients who had known his dogs, professionals he had trained, officials, and strangers moved by his story. Caroline gave the main speech. "Professor Robert taught us that greatness isn't measured by wealth or fame, but by the ability to love without conditions and turn that love into action for the good of others." Peter was there with his family. Little Duke, now 5, carried a rose to place on Grandpa Robert's casket. "Daddy, did Grandpa Robert go meet the dog Duke in heaven?" the child asked. "Yes, son, and they're very happy together." Robert was buried in the municipal cemetery, but his true memorial remained alive. The Helen Wilson Institute continued to thrive, training new therapists and benefiting thousands of people annually. In the Institute's backyard, beneath the tree where Duke, Buddy, Moon and Thunder were buried, a special plaque was placed. Robert Johnson, 1971-2058, the man who learned to love unconditionally and taught that lesson to the world. True love isn't a feeling, it's a choice. 10 years after Robert's passing, the institute bearing his name had expanded to 50 countries. His methodology was taught in universities worldwide. Peter, now the national director of the program, organized a special ceremony to mark the 47 years since Robert first met the puppies on the road. Professor Robert, Duke and Buddy turned tragedy into triumph, abandonment into love, loneliness into family, Peter said to an international audience. Today, millions of people benefit from the work that began with a trucker who decided to stop and help 2 puppies shivering in the cold. In the audience was Sophie, the girl with Down syndrome who had met Robert when she was 8. Now 18, She was about to start veterinary school. "Professor Peter, may I share something?" Sophie asked. "Of course, Sophie." Sophie stepped confidently onto the stage. "Grandpa Robert taught me that being different can be a gift. Today, thanks to him and his dogs, I know I can help others through my love for animals." The audience applauded, deeply moved. Sophie represented thousands of people who had been inspired by Robert's story. That evening, after the ceremony, Peter visited the shared grave at the Institute. "Professor Robert, Duke, Buddy, Moon, Thunder, look at what we've built together. Your love is still saving lives." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the tree. Peter felt as though they were present, approving all that had been accomplished. The story of Robert and his 4 dogs had become a legend, but a living one, still transforming lives through unconditional love for animals and dedication to others. And so, on a frigid road in Minnesota, 2 abandoned puppies not only found a home but planted the seeds of a quiet revolution built on love, compassion, and the certainty that small acts can change the world forever. With every child who smiled during a therapy session, every elderly person who found companionship through an animal, every professional who discovered their calling in pet care, the story of Robert, Duke, Buddy, Moon, and Thunder continued to be written. Because true love never dies. It simply becomes an eternal legacy, passed down through generations, inspiring new acts of kindness and proving that compassion is the most powerful force in the universe. The end. And so concludes this extraordinary journey of unconditional love, teaching us that sometimes losing everything is necessary to discover what truly matters. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who also needs to believe in the transformative power of true love.